oh hell, plutonium. We're smuggling plutonium into the United States inside a shark. Yeah, I'm coming over at 7 o'clock with a couple bottles of Diet Coke. We're going to do an all-nighter. We've got 2 to 3 days to come up with a feature film. I'll be over at 7. Okay, cool. Hung up. On the outside, I'm like, cool. Inside, I'm like, anyone who wants to become good at anything, you have to suck for a while. Stuff in the first time, so I was there for 48 hours. I left my stuff in the car. Someone made my car, broke into it, stole everything I owned. We want to fly you back to LA to come in and pitch to all the execs of DC and Warner Home Entertainment. And the phone rings. It's like, yeah, they don't want the pitch. They bought our idea. We're doing the documentary.
I want to start by traveling back in time to when you were a kid. So I know that you first fell in love with movies when you saw Star Wars for the first time. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and how that kind of changed your perspective on what you wanted to do?
Well, I do have to kind of thank and blame George Lucas for ruining me in that regard. Actually, it starts even earlier.
Okay.
I always have had this love for movies and actually what they also represent. So I'll give you 2 little early stories. The first big, adult film I think I ever remember seeing was actually The Hindenburg, which I think was 1975. Saw it at a drive-in with my parents. And the film did 2 things. I mean, seeing it up on, it was on a drive-in, the big screen with the terrible little audio on the speaker there, the spectacle of it. Because the Hindenburg is a story. It took, the tragedy took place in Lakehurst, New Jersey, and I lived in New Jersey about 30 minutes from there. And what the film did is, I just love the film, but it also then made me want to learn about the Hindenburg. So I suddenly just immersed myself in learning about, blimps, dirigibles, zeppelins, and all that. Made my parents take me to the hangar where the whole thing actually happened. So that right there kind of planted the seed of the idea of film making me want to learn more about anything I saw in there, in addition to just films itself. But yeah, 2 films actually really broke me. The first, of course, is Star Wars. Saw that in May 1977. I was 8 years old, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And my buddy Philip and I, his mother took us to the movie theater in Bricktown, New Jersey. And we sat down and we watched about, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I was so excited to see the movie. The first time I saw it, I actually didn't read the opening crawl. I'm like, let's get to the movie. And the movie went, and it was, transformational. And I remember coming home, and my mom said to me, "Oh, what'd you think of the movie?" And rather than saying, "Oh, it's great, I love blah blah," I had a very simple response: "I want to make movies someday." Boom, ruined right then and there. And that just blossomed into, of course, I had, growing up, everything Star Wars. I had all the figures. Yes, I did have, and still have them tucked away. Don't use them now, though. My Star Wars sheets, and the love of that. And then I'll jump to another movie, and I'll come back to this. The second movie is Jaws.
Yes.
So Jaws, which came out in 1975. I didn't see it. I would have been 6 years old at the time and had nightmares to this day. But when Jaws 2 was getting ready to come out, I saw Jaws in the theater as a re-release, because they used to do that a lot back then, before home video and all that. Movies would come back in the theaters, and I saw Jaws, and it blew me away. And here's another thing: one of the the stories that led to Jaws, the famed shark attacks in New Jersey in 1617, around Matawan Creek and all that. I lived in Jersey. And so this was another thing that was nearby me. So seeing that movie blew me away. I loved it. And it also ignited my love of sharks, which is my other thing, which came back, as we'll talk a little bit later, to be something for there. So that's one of the things about film, is it makes me love the storytelling medium, the escapism, but it also makes me interested in the world for that. And now I'll cycle back to Star Wars and all that, because I said I wanted all the figures, which I still have to this day, and having the Star Wars posters on my wall. But it also ignited this love of movie posters.
Yes.
I love movie posters. So growing up being a teenager, everyone always had the sports posters and the bikini posters. Now I had a few of those. I am a normal guy. But my main thing was I wanted the movie posters on the wall. But not just any movie poster. I wanted it with the title. The title block at the bottom, because to me that was like real. And I remember being a teenager, my walls were just plastered with movie posters, and looking at them and going, someday. Someday. Jump ahead to 1999 when they had the cast and crew screening of Shark Attack, my first feature film that I wrote. After the screening got done, we came out and there was the big, buffet and party stuff and all that. And off to the side, they had a stack of one-sheets. And I walked up, and there was the poster, and there was my name in the credit block. And I started crying.
Yes,
because
that's beautiful.
It was the realization of something that I had thrown out to the universe, 15 years before that. And to see that made flesh there.
Yes.
And when they're like, would you like a poster? Yes.
Could I have 10?
Yeah, I have 10. So I have them. They're framed, and I've got one up on my wall. So that's a very long roundabout answer of how seeing the movies and how it's always been a love of cinema. And you know what? I'll give you one more story. Back to even there. Once I had seen the Hindenburg and all that, and I remember just loving television, all that escapism thing. I remember watching TV with my parents one night, and we were watching a multi-camera sitcom shot on video. It's like Happy Days or something along those lines, something that was back then, but one of those that was shot on video. And when it ended, it went to an hour-long procedural shot on film, like Columbo. And I remember saying to my parents, these aren't the same. And they're like, oh, no, honey, yeah, that show ended. This is a new show. But what they didn't realize, what I was actually saying is, video looks different than film. I didn't even know what they were, but I could already see that kind of difference. So, I was obviously broken from a very young age.
And so did that influence the way that, like, even throughout high school, was that, like, your focus? And what were you doing at that time to figure out how to position yourself where you wanted to be?
Anything I could do that would touch film and all that, I would. I would read any books that were out. This was before the internet, so getting that type of information was hard. I remember watching on PBS, the PBS affiliates in New Jersey and all that, they would occasionally run the making ofs of certain films. There's a great classic making of Raiders of the Lost Ark and things like that, and me going out of my way to see them, anything I could to get every little bit of knowledge. I got all the fan books. I read, Starlog and Fangoria at a much too young age, I might add. Whenever I could, anything to learn about the industry. When I go to the library, I'd get books on filmmaking. Anything I could see to learn about that was absolutely what I would do. And I'll give you a crazy story. When I was in high school, 16 years old, dinosaurs are still roaming the earth, by the way. I got as a birthday or Christmas present, I got my parents to order me a daily subscription to the Hollywood Reporter, back when it was a daily print publication. No internet then and all that. So I was living in Milwaukee at the time, 16, so we're talking about 1985, and I ordered it. I remember our phone rang, back when, of course, everyone had landlines back then, and I picked up the phone, and someone goes, can I talk to Mr. Devine? I said, oh, my dad's out there. Like, well, we're looking for Scott Devine. I'm like, oh, that's me. And it turns out it was one of the subscription managers from Hollywood Reporter. He's like, thank you for subscribing to the Reporter. I do want to let you know that the publication really is much more centered around Los Angeles, where it's sent out by a messenger every day. You living in the Midwest, we're going to have to mail it. And it might work out that you may not get it one day. You might get 2 on one day. They might be out of order and all that. And I said, no, that's okay. I'm still going to read them. My big one is I wanted the Tuesday edition, which that's what had the box office breakdown. And I said, I'm really excited. And he goes, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He's like, how old are you? I said, 16. He's like, I can say without a doubt you're the only teenager in the state of Wisconsin who has a subscription to the Hollywood Reporter. He's like, I don't know of many teenagers who even have it. So that was something I always did. And when I went off to, in high school, any classes that tied to film, I did theater and all that. And when I went off to college, going for a film degree was a no-brainer. I actually started off, I was a double major, film and computer science.
Interesting.
The film major was for me, the computer science was for my parents, because, growing up, all that, they're like, this film thing, it's got to be a phase. When's he going to grow out of it?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I still have it, never will.
That's amazing. It's amazing, Scott. So this is the perfect segue. You, Spencer, and I, we all have this in common. We're all students of film. We all love storytelling. It's sometimes an issue, definitely at dinner parties, but something we all share. We had a similar kind of, not aha moment, but this coming of time with storytelling that's really special and almost a specific moment in time that we can isolate as this is when we have to do this. You saying after seeing Star Wars, oh, I have to make films. What did that mean to you, the actual making of films? So going off to film school, what was attractive to you? What were you wanting to pursue in that?
Well, for me, in undergrad, I went to the University of Wisconsin, which actually wasn't known for production, but very well known for theory. So I actually learned a lot of theory from some of, if you read film books, like film art, things by, Tino Ballio, things like that, there were professors at the University of Wisconsin, which was great because I got it right from them. Of course, you can never argue because they literally wrote the book.
Right.
So I got all the theory and all that, but then having the chance to finally physically make it. I mean, it was a wonderful and a sobering experience. I remember the very first film camera I ever used, because this was all still during the days of analog. We shot on film. I had a Super 8 film camera, hand cranked,
Yep.
so it was like a wind up. And I remember taking out of our cage and looking at her, it said U.S. Army surplus. So I was shooting with a camera from World War II, which was kind of cool.
Wow.
But the idea of learning how to do it, you learn by making mistakes. The very first time I went out and tried to shoot day for night, rather than underexposing at 2 stops, I overexposed at 2 stops, which was great because back then you had to send it off to the lab and pay for that. And I came back and I screened it and I went, wow, I blew that out. But guess what? I learned. So it is trial and error. Anyone who wants to become good at anything, you can't go in and expect to be great from the beginning. You have to suck for a while.
Right.
Yes.
And every day you suck a little less, and hopefully you do it, the 10,000 hour thing. The idea, if you love it enough, you invest yourself, you invest the time, and you learn how to do it. And I learned through a lot of mistakes and talking with a lot of people who knew a lot more than I did, still to this day.
Yeah.
I've been working in the film industry really for, over 3 decades. Wait, yeah, even longer than that.
That's amazing.
And I am still amazed at how much there is to learn and how much I don't know. I will never know it all. Or assume if you know it all, it's on your deathbed. I know it all, and then you're out.
Sure.
But no, to this day, I still am constantly reading and researching and all that stuff, and the learning process never ends, which in itself is thrilling to know that you never know it all.
Yeah.
There's always more to read, always more to learn, always more to watch.
Yes.
I love it when someone comes up and mentions, you've got to see this film. Like, I don't know this film.
Yes.
Boom, let me go try. And then I can say to them, all right, I'll see this film, but if you see this film.
Yes, sir.
So someone comes up with an obscure gem, a diamond in the rough, that's always fun for me.
No, I love that. And that actually brings up a story so last year, Taye and I produced a 5-episode murder mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And we shot it. The production was amazing, and we learned so much through it. A lot thanks to a lot of the stuff we learned from you.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
In spring quarter. But we recently kind of watched like this first full cut of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot that I think we were kind of disappointed in certain ways. And I think we caught ourselves as like, this is a good thing. Like, we just identified 100 things we can improve on the next one. It's like, I'd way rather us be in this situation disappointed knowing what we need to address than thinking this was some masterpiece and that being like where we flatlined forever. And so I really appreciate you sharing that.
I'll say this. If you ever create something and you sit down and it's 100% perfect, leave the industry. Because it's never going to be perfect. The chase for perfection, it's a fool's errand. You're never going to get there. Everything I watch, all I see are the mistakes. I show my thesis film, all right, and it's 30 years old, and I look at it, and I am still pissed off at a couple of the choices I made, going, why did I not get tighter on that shot? Why did I not do that? So, yeah, it really is. All you can hope is look at something going, you know what? I did okay there. I did okay there.
Yes, sir.
But I will tell you this, there is no critic out there in the world that is harder on me than I am on myself.
Yeah,
I think we can relate to that.
for sure.
For sure.
If you could give a quick summary of what your takeaways for film school was, like in what ways did you derive value from it? Were there other areas that you think maybe it slowed you down? Like, what was your kind of relationship with that?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, undergrad, obviously, you want to get your undergrad degree. And I will say this to anybody. The undergrad degree is important not so much for the degree, but for the college experience. The idea for most people, it's their first time away from home. I got to do my laundry for myself the first time. I've got to figure out a schedule. I got to figure out what to eat. I'm going to meet a whole bunch of people I haven't before. You're outside your comfort zone, and that's where true growth happens. So when I did that in undergrad, with my film and my comp sci degree, by the way, the comp sci degree eventually went away, and I focused on film. And I remember telling my dad the day I dropped my comp sci degree, and he's like, and I said, Dad, I want to focus on the thing I love. And, he's like, all right. And I didn't think I convinced him, but they were big fans of me going to grad school, and they still to this day are my single biggest fans, and they are my biggest form of support. But I got off topic there. But, undergrad, I got done. I made some films. I really pushed myself. I was in a school that was much more about theory than film. And also the people who did film theirs, it was so much experimental. Little bit of document. No one really did narrative, and I wanted narrative. I wanted to run off with Indiana Jones. I wanted to go back to the future with Marty McFly. I love the escapism. I love comedy. I love little things like that. I love the types of films where you're shoving popcorn in your face going, oh my,
Yeah.
And so when I got to the end of that, I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do now? I was thinking after I get my degree, I'll go out to Hollywood and try and make it and all that. But then I thought for a second, this is a challenging field. Better be smart about it. And my college professor at University of Wisconsin, a gentleman named J.J. Murphy, who was a big influence on me, who saw that I had been bit by the bug and I was never getting cured, encouraged me to a couple of grad schools, including one of them being Florida State. And I talked to my parents. I said, I want to go right from undergrad and get an MFA degree. Right. And I said, I know it's going to stop me from going and pursuing the industry, but what it does do, one, I will have more to offer when I get out there. And also, by having an MFA degree, it's a terminal degree, and I said it provides me the opportunity if I ever want to teach. And I will say this, I've always had an inkling to teach. And if you ask my mom, she'll say I was born to be a teacher because I just love to talk, and I'm very comfortable with that. So I went off to grad school. And even though I got my undergrad degree in film, I got my graduate degree in film, so it was some repeats. And I went off to Florida State's Graduate Film School. It was the infancy of the program. I was only part of the third graduating class. And that was a kind of a blessing because the school was still trying to find out what it was going to be. So we didn't have a lot of, how should we say, requirements or enough. We did not have enough supervision. So what we did was we kind of made stuff up on our own. While I was there, I worked on my first feature film. That I didn't do. It was a feature film, a small little film, if you can find it, called Hidden Fears. I was a grip and a dolly grip on it. All the film school guys were on it. But what I got out of my MFA degree, other than my safety net, if I want to say, or the MFA and the right to teach, is my thesis film is something I still to this day I'm proud of. But on top of that, and coming up with my own style and affirming the types of films I wanted to make, I made a ton of great connections. And anyone who ever says, well, why do you go to film school? Just look at some YouTube videos. They're missing the point. The thing about film school is you are in an area, you're in a time where it's all about finding who you are, finding your style, and collaborating. The students who are in there, they're not your classmates, they're not really your competition per se, they're your comrades in arms. To this day, some of my closest collaborators, including Will Hook, who wrote the Shark Attack movies with me, are my film school buddies, because those are the people who are there with you in the trenches. They're the ones who are sitting in the editing room with you at 4 a.m. scarfing down cold pizza, trying to figure out how in God's name are we going to make this shot work. Right. So you had no money, you just had that, and you helped each other out. So when you got out and you had the opportunity to hire people or be hired, it's like, they had my back. I'm going to give them a call. Right. And Hollywood is full of stories of people who been in the industry for decades, and who do they work with? Their friends from film school. Right. So really what I got out of that was an understanding of creativity, the ability to really push myself, and a group of collaborators who many of whom I still call my closest friends.
That's incredible. Amazing. And those 4 a.m. nights sound very familiar to us.
I don't know what you're talking about right now.
Okay. Yes. Well, taking us another step forward, your first step into the film industry was working at ICM in the mailroom. How did you come across that job?
Well, oddly enough, after I got my my degree, All right, my MFA degree. And my award-winning short film. Unfortunately, sometimes you'll find that short film and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. I made the decision to give LA a try. I was up for a couple of jobs elsewhere in town. After grad school from Florida, I went back to Milwaukee to save up some money and figure out where I wanted to go next. And I actually was offered a job in Orlando and another one down in, or was up for a job in Birmingham doing regional commercials and things like that, where I'd still be a creative. But I remember telling my parents, I got offered this job in Orlando, and this was when Florida was still kind of considered the first time something was an alternative to Hollywood. So I thought I might give it a shot. So let me go to LA. I had an airline ticket that I hadn't used up, and let me just take a look out there before I make this decision. I flew out to LA, and I slept on the couch of my buddy, Will Hook, and I got a taste of LA. And I saw he was working as like a PA with Tony Scott's production company, a company called this production called Totem in West Hollywood. I remember walking in, and he was working with the person who was doing the BTS for the film Crimson Tide. And I'm in LA, and I'm seeing all the places I wanted to, and I'm seeing the giant billboards and all that. And I got done, and I flew home, and I told my parents, yeah, I'm not going to take the job in Orlando. I think I'm going to move to Los Angeles. And they said, really? When are you thinking of going? And I went, Tuesday. And I packed my stuff in my car up on that Tuesday, and I drove to LA, and I stayed with Will. And I didn't want to bring all my stuff in the first time, so I was there for 48 hours. I left my stuff in the car. Someone made my car, broke into it, stole everything I owned, except for what I brought inside. And I'm like, wow. And that was my welcome to LA story. And I remember going, all right. So I went out and got myself a studio apartment. And I got myself a futon to sleep on. I remember the apartment I picked. I picked it because in LA, most apartments don't come with fridges. It's just a California thing. I found one that had a 2/3 size fridge that came with it, cost next to nothing, right on Hollywood Boulevard, about a mile from the Chinese Theater. And I took the apartment. I went out there, and I started off I got the insurance settlement for all the stuff that had been stolen. I got a few things. I had a microwave, a plate, a fork, and a knife in my computer. I am not kidding you, sleeping on a futon. I'm like, all right, I guess I got to make some money.
That's basic.
And so one of my friends said, I got a friend who works at this temp agency called Right Connections that specializes in the entertainment industry. So I went in, met with them, and said, yeah, we'll give you placements in entertainment industry, temp jobs. Now, by temp jobs, I meant, filling in for someone who was sick or, doing whatever. And one of the things, I'd done it for a couple of days, and they said, hey, we want you to go to ICM to work in the mailroom for a day. Sure. Got out one of my few button-down shirts, put a tie on, went in the mailroom. And that first day, I'm like, wow. And here I was. Literally, that's kind of, that cliche you see the person pushing the mail cart around. That was me. MFA degree, award-winning film, and here I am delivering mail to people. And I'm 25 years old at the time. And I'm like, okay. But I had a good attitude, and I worked hard that day. And at the end of the day came and said, we're going to tell him to come back tomorrow. And I came back the next day. He said, you know what? We want to have you on what we call permalance. Basically, you just keep coming here every day until either we don't need you anymore or whatever. And those 1 or 2 days turned into several weeks. And they watched that I was always energetic. I wasn't like, this is beneath me. I'm like, no, this is cool. Yes, the trades were there. I would always have time to read the trades and all that. And, I started meeting people up there and who was who. And they said, okay, how would you like to be hired full-time? We'd like to put you on as an assistant on someone's desk. I said, cool. And they hired me full-time. I made no money. I think it was like $450 gross for the week. And they started floating me on desks. And then eventually I ended up full-time on the desk of an agent, a legendary agent, a gentleman named Jack Gilardi, who was one of the VPs of Motion Picture Talent. Classic agent who was married to Annette Funicello. So some of the people might know of Frankie and Annette, from the Beach Blanket Bingo movies and all that, the Mouseketeer. Yeah, her. And he represented, classic, legendary actors. Fortunately, some of whom younger people may not know, but people like Shelley Winters, Charlton Heston, who I got to meet and know very well, Roger Moore, Roy Scheider, people of this nature, just like, oh my gosh, the people I grew up watching.
Right.
And I worked on his desk for 4 years. I started off as second assistant, then became first assistant, and I was there until I got Shark Attack. Shark Attack got made, did really well, and the day I got Shark Attack 2, the offer, was the day I gave notice. So that was how one day led to my first job, and how it led to 4 years and led to my first script deal and all that. So I'll end that really rambly story with one thing. Those who are interested in getting in the industry, talk to people. Find out their stories of how they got their foot in the door. Everyone is different. I'll tell you, everyone is interesting. And so many of them are, this opportunity presented itself and I jumped at it. And when you jump at that opportunity, you've got to embrace whatever you're doing like it's the most important thing. If you're sweeping floors, be the best damn floor sweeper there is. I was delivering mail. Really? Did not use a lot of my brain, but I was there, I was engaged, and I was acting like I was happy to be there. Because I was making money, I was getting closer to what I wanted to do. So that's just an advice on anything for anyone. If you have the opportunity to do something, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't put yourself into it 100%.
Yes, sir.
I got on my soapbox there.
No, I
do that a lot.
love that so much, and I think we try our best to live that every day, and we always try to hold each other accountable when it comes to those kind of things. And a quote that Taye actually said that continues to stick with me, and this was like early on in our friendship, and he said, "I like a king who sweeps," and his point was that every single part of this world is required to make a story happen, to make these films. Everyone from the person moving the lights to the person preparing the food for the actors, like all of these roles, if any of them go, we don't get to tell the story. And so all of them are equally as important. And I think bringing that level of focus to it is huge. So that's an incredible
filmmaking.
story.
It is a team effort. You know,
Right.
they always say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to make a film. And in one sense, it's a house of cards. And if you pull something that you might think is minor away, it collapses. So yes, always be appreciative and respectful of anyone on a set. Anyone who's doing this, look, I'll say this of anybody. Anyone who has a job and is working, anyone who looks at someone and looks down at what they do, shame on them. You got someone who's providing for themselves, for their family, putting in a hard day's work, that is to be respected.
You've said it a few times now, Shark Attack.
Shark Attack.
Spencer and I, these past few days, we were able to watch the first Shark Attack.
Okay.
Very entertaining. Let me just start with that. We enjoyed it. We paused in certain moments just to kind of debrief what was happening and really lock in on our characters. We're science fiction fans. We love kind of the chemistry. We love world building. All of this went into Shark Attack. But can you kind of break down some of the pre-production and, I don't know, maybe how the inception of the film actually happened?
I
Because
know
I'm
that
sure there's some thoughts here.
quite well. I've told it in my classes. So
Yes, sir.
here is how Shark Attack happened. I've been working for Jack Gilardi for a couple of months, and when we would do calls, I had my desk outside his office, but I also had a desk inside his office. So I spent more time in there running calls with him. He'd be on one call, I'd be setting up the next or taking notes, and whenever he took meetings, I'd be taking notes and all that, or he'd say, "Hey, Scott, I need this," or "Do this," blah, blah, blah. So I was in there for a meeting, and he was talking on the phone with Avi Lerner, who is the head of New Image Millennium Films. You might know them. They're the company that did the Expendables films, some of the Rambo films, Hitman's Bodyguard and all that. They were a very large, I'd say this with, absolute love, B films. Films that either went direct to DVD or direct to video back when we had that, or it'd play very well in overseas markets and all that, not necessarily theatrical ones here.
Right.
But I knew who they were. I knew the films they made. And I was in his office, and they were talking. And like I said, one of my boss's clients was Roy Scheider, a wonderful gentleman, by the way. It was always fun talking with him. And they were on the phone talking. This was 1995. I think it was, was it September or something around there? So I'd been with Jack a couple of months. And they're talking, and suddenly they mentioned, Jack's like, Roy, still well known for Jaws films and all that, he'd be up for doing, a shark-related movie. Now, there were no shark movies really out there. This was kind of in a time where there really weren't any. And Avi had said to him, yeah, well, Jack, we had a shark script, but the person sold off part of the rights, and we really don't have anything. Now I'm going to freeze time for you. I'm sitting there listening to this. You always talk about screenwriting, that what if moment or whatever.
Yep.
So I'm listening, and all of a sudden, an image popped into my head. Now, like I said, I'm a shark nut. So they're talking about something that's in my wheelhouse. I know everything about sharks. And I had read earlier, either that day or the day before, an article about drug smugglers who were making homemade submarines to smuggle drugs into the United States. And this, by the way, this all happened in the blink of an eye. Sorry if that was too loud. I said, okay, well, instead of smuggle drugs inside of a shark, because those submarines are garbage, but a shark, you put it in the sea, it's got the drugs in it, it goes under, it's not detected, you catch it, cut it open, get the drugs out. No, drugs, it's not worth it. It's not financially viable. You need something bigger. Maybe jewels or something like that. Yeah, we've seen jewels all the time. Oh, hell. Plutonium. We're smuggling plutonium into the United States inside a shark. This happened in about 0.2 of a second. And I went, got it, just this one image. And I went, hey, Jack. He's on the phone with me. He's like, yeah. I know as much about sharks as most experts. I could probably write you a feature treatment, I don't know, 2-3 days. I am completely bullshitting. All I had in my mind was an image of that. Yeah. And he goes on the phone, Avi, what do you think? He's like, yeah. Like, okay, get us a treatment. And I said, great. I said, hey, I got to go use the bathroom. He's like, all right. I got up, walked out to the office. I went, oh my God, what did I just do? I just promised something. I just bluffed, and they said,
That's
go
amazing.
for it.
This is amazing.
I picked up the phone, and I went, okay. And I called my film school buddy, Will Hook, one of my only friends in town. I said, Will, and I realized when I was doing this, I was working a full-time job, long time. No way I could do this on my own. I needed someone I trusted. I said, Will, I'm coming over at 7 o'clock with a couple bottles of Diet Coke. We're going to do an all-nighter. We've got 2 to 3 days to come up with a feature film about sharks. Here's the image. I'll be over at 7. Okay, cool. Hung up, went back, finished the day, got done, and then Will and I basically spent the next 2-3 nights working until stupid o'clock coming up with a treatment. And it was called, the original was called Hammerheads and all that. And we gave it to them, and they looked at it and we said, yeah, we like this. And they gave us notes. No money here, by the way.
Right,
but this was
of course.
Opportunity. And this is the whole thing about seizing the opportunity.
Right.
I could have very easily kind of blown it off and would have gone away. They would have let it go, but no. So we did the notes on that, gave them another draft. They went, yeah, we like this. Why don't you talk to Roy? So I had a conversation for about an hour and a half on the phone with Roy Scheider, who gave us the interesting angle of, because ours was originally a little more, we wanted to stay as far away from Jaws as possible because
Right.
we knew no one has ever made a shark film that equals Jaws, and to this date, no one ever has. I think no one ever will. Okay, that's my statement.
Yes, sir.
I'll live
Yes,
by
sir.
that. And he came up with the idea of sharks not getting cancer. So we use that. So let's tie in a medical thing, but there's something underneath it. There's something nefarious because when people spend money for what seems to be an altruistic need, sometimes there is greed behind it.
Sure.
And we came up and we turned it in, and they went, okay, we want you to write a script. And I am like inside, on the outside, I'm like, cool. Inside, I'm like,
Yeah, of course.
and what did they offer us money-wise? I mean, they could have offered me a ham sandwich, and I would have said yes. It was a low money offer. We weren't in the Writers Guild, so it was less than what even Scale was.
Mm-hmm.
But it was 2 drafts
Right.
and a polish, and they could have canceled it at any time. If we turned the first draft, they didn't like it, they could kill the deal. They could kill it after the second deal, whatever. 2 drafts and a polish, and then a bump if it ever went into production. And so Will and I went to work, and we hucked out the first draft. And we did about 3 months, and we turned it in. And they liked it, and it sat for a year. And then we took a meeting with a director. Someone, I think they just were giving a director a meeting just for the sake of giving this director a meeting because they didn't know what they were talking about. And they wanted to treat, they're like, we're more interested in this director's like, I'm more interested in the relationship between the male lead and the female lead. And Will and I are like, well, we kind of put the female lead in there because it's expected, but because we didn't want to do Jaws where it's just the guys, so we had a kind of a little romance in there and all that, but it's really about the sharks.
Right.
Sure, whatever. And New Image came back and said, yeah, she's not going to do it, but write a second draft. And we're like, well, what are the notes? And they said, write a second draft.
Wow.
So they left it up to Will and I to basically, critique ourselves. And
Yeah.
we took the script and we ripped it apart down to the structural steel throughout the third act, because it was mostly on the water, and we know how expensive it is to shoot on the water,
Right.
and we knew what their budget was going to be. Their budget was going to be, we weren't going to have Jaws money. We were going to have B-film money, so we know we had to keep some land-based stuff. So we did the second draft.
Yes.
And then it kind of sat for a little bit. And we're like, we're still proud of it. But then we've got a fortunate break. A book hit the stands. I think it was 1997. So it's been about almost 2 years since we had done this. I believe that's the right year, 97. A book came out called Meg, which was about a megalodon in modern times. And suddenly the industry went nuts. The book was immediately picked up. It was fast-tracked. And then suddenly everyone said, oh my gosh, we got to make a shark movie because Meg's going to get made. Warner Brothers started going fast-track on a script they had been developing for years called Deep Blue Sea. Well, New Image went, we got a shark film. And like that, a new director was attached, a gentleman named Bob Ostrowski, and the film was greenlit. And they said, get to work. So took about 2 years, of off and on to doing the first 2 drafts. And then Will and I did 2 drafts with the director, Bob, in 4 weeks. So again, I was during the day, I was working at ICM. Will was meeting with the director. And as soon as I got done with the work, I went over, and the 3 of us basically lived at his apartment for the month. His wife, one of her late, was cooking for us, making us dinner. We just sat out. And Bob Ostrowski really helped us. He took this film to, he really improved on certain things, added a couple of aspects that we hadn't thought of, threw in a few more action aspects, a chase scene and stuff like that, and it was great. And suddenly, boom, we were off and running, and then the film was shot in the summer of 1998 around in South Africa.
That's so amazing.
I am absolutely mind blown.
I have like 7 different responses.
All
So do
from
I.
one stupid idea that,
In a
by the way,
single
and that
instant.
never made it in. That didn't even make it into the first draft. That
But it
initial
still created
idea
that spark.
created
Yeah.
the spark, and you never know where an idea is going to come from. And as Stephen King, who's legendary for coming up with ideas, he says, there is no storehouse of ideas. It's not your job necessarily to come up with an idea. It's to be there and recognize when the idea presents itself and to grab onto it. And that's what I did. I took my love of sharks, that opportunity, and a story around the news, and I smashed it all together, and it was chocolate and peanut butter, and I made Reese's peanut butter cups out of it. And that was it.
So, this is amazing, first of all. I love this story because this is a prime example of, okay, call it good luck, but creating that surface area of good luck. Like, you seize this opportunity. If I was in this opportunity, I would try to do a similar thing. Do you think, for all the filmmakers or people trying to make a film out there today, what does that moment look like? How can you make yourself the most, attractive or marketable? Like you truly had nothing necessarily on paper to present, but you saw that moment.
Well, you mentioned a thing about luck, and there's a classic old saying that luck is where opportunity meets preparedness.
Right.
Where you are ready. I think it's the way it is. Yeah. You see that and you seize the opportunity. So knowing where it is and recognizing that moment and grabbing onto it like it is, like you have found the gold ring.
Right.
And putting yourself into it and believing in what you're doing and just throwing yourself at it and say, let's see what we can do with that. So that's really what it comes down to is, so many people say, oh, I wish I had the opportunities. It's like, how many opportunities pass by you? You're like a stranger in a crowd and you didn't even realize it.
Yes.
So it's being aware, being of the situation, and it's kind of being a bit of a yes man and saying, what if, and let me see where this can go. And here's the thing, you're going to do that multiple times, and most of them are going to fall by the wayside.
Yes.
So the idea when we tell people always have an elevator pitch, always have something ready to go, I am a firm believer of that. I always have a business card in my wallet. I always have a pitch of a couple projects ready to go because you never know when you're going to meet up with someone and the opportunity is going to present itself. And if you don't grab it like that, it'll be gone.
Yes, sir.
So that's all I can say. And this was the instance. This was one of the opportunities I had that it worked. And I am thankful for this day. Every time I look at my wall and see that poster, every
Yes.
time I see it playing on one of the streamers, or I think it's on Amazon Prime now or whatever.
That's
So
where
we
we
watched
watched
it.
Yeah, we watched it. Yeah, on their freebie. Yeah, it's made its rounds on every surface. Actually, you know what? I'm going to tell you a little side story. So I mentioned Deep Blue Sea. Okay, So when Shark Attack came out, Deep Blue Sea got made. If you haven't seen it, it's a great shark movie directed by Rennie Harlan, a wonderful action director. Did the original Cliffhanger, films like that. So Deep Blue Sea got greenlit by Warner Brothers, and they went into production not too long. I mean, we basically, I think it almost wrapped when they did their production. And, our film went out and was sold at AFM, the American Film Market, in March of 1999. And we got picked up in a whole bunch of countries. And the biggest, our domestic release, HBO grabbed it. And HBO wanted to release it because they knew about, Deep Blue Sea. The industry knows about what else is going on. So that's why I always tell people, learn about the industry, learn who else is making what. So they grabbed it and they positioned it that Deep Blue Sea came out in theaters, and I know the date, July 30th, 1999. Shark Attack premiered on HBO on Friday, July 30th, 1999. What did that mean? Well, it meant, one, Warner Brothers spent all this money on promotion, getting everybody in America frothing about shark movies, and then HBO goes, here's our shark movie. So we kind of rode the publicity wave of Deep Blue Sea, and it came out. So they were in the theaters. We were at home for the people who didn't want to go to the theaters, and Shark Attack was HBO's most successful original film. I don't know if it was the Friday night premiere, whatever, for that year. And just a week or so after Shark Attack came out, they saw the numbers. They asked for Shark Attack 2. It didn't go to them, but to jump ahead, I remember running into Rennie Harlan. A friend of mine was his assistant, and they were out one time, and I ran into her. She's like, "Would you like to meet Rennie Harlan?" I said, "Oh yeah, I got to meet Rennie." And I went up, and I said, "It's a real pleasure to meet you. I've been a fan of your films for so long, and I owe you a debt of gratitude. You directed Deep Blue Sea. I did Shark Attack. We rode your publicity wave. You made a great film. Thank you very much." And he was very happy. There's room for everybody. So
that's really
cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I have a million things to say here. I do want to take a slight backtrack. When you were talking about this idea of opportunity and preparedness, something clicked for me that this conversation right here is a huge, huge opportunity for us. So I just want to take a moment to let you know how grateful we are for the chance to sit down here with you.
My pleasure.
I feel like I've already learned so much, and I already know we're going to probably have a 2-hour debrief after this.
My legs underneath are just
talking
kicking.
about everything we've learned. But you mentioned Shark Attacks as a sequel. And it's actually ended up being a trilogy.
A trilogy, yeah.
Could you kind of walk us through a little bit of how that journey kind of transpired? You kind of introduced Shark Attack 2. How did that go, and then how did it end up getting that final third one?
Okay. Well, I'm going to say I am the co-writer of a trilogy.
Right.
Will Hook, who was my writing partner on it, was, he and I, we're considered a writing team. If you look at the credits, it always has the ampersand, which means a team. My buddy and I, so it's our baby. We feel that. There were two different directors. Bob Ostrowski directed part 1. David Worth directed parts 2 and 3. And David Worth, if you don't know, great DP, great director. He was DP for Clint Eastwood on classic films like Every Which Way But Loose, Bronco Billy, and all that.
Wow.
And directed films like Kickboxer and action films and all that. So he was a double threat. But, it was the Shark Attack trilogy was interesting. The first one was very, very popular. And again, HBO wanted the sequel right away. So, of course, New Image came to us and said, "We want you're greenlit on the sequel." I mean, it was... They basically came and didn't say, "We want you to write a treatment." Nope, it's greenlit, get to work on the sequel. We said, okay, let's continue the story. We had the main character, our Stephen McCrae character, played by Casper Van Dien. We had the Corinne DeSantis character, played by Jenny McShane. Everyone else, Ernie Hudson was eaten by the sharks, and everyone else was gone. But we thought, we didn't kill off all the sharks, let's continue their story. And then we got thrown a bit of a curve where New Image said, "We don't want the actors back. We don't want the characters. The sharks are the star." So they wanted us to start from scratch and just kind of basically almost have a sequel just in name and not story, which I will tell you is not something I'm a fan of. Because I'm like, if it's a sequel, people are going to expect that. So Will and I sat down. They said they didn't care what we did. And we said, all right. So the Sharks in Shark Attack 2, they're the offspring of the Sharks in Shark Attack 1. That's the best we're going to be able to do. We made a fleeting reference or two to to Shark Attack 1, but we had to go from scratch. So we brought in new characters and all that, and we learned a lot from the first film, okay? Number one, our goal always with the first one was to steer clear of Jaws. We don't want to tread on sacred ground.
Right.
Jaws is one of my top 5 films of all time. It's like Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws, Field of Dreams, Dawn of the Dead, and Back to the Future. I think that's 6. But it's to me, it's with 1 or 2 shots, it's the perfect film. The shot where the shark bounces off the boat, that one could be done better, but that's 70s special effects. And by the way, the making of Jaws in itself is a masterclass on filmmaking. In essence, one thing you could say how not to make a film, but how to make a film even when the train goes off the tracks. Made by Steven Spielberg, who at the time I think was, I want to say like 28 years
he was
old.
really young.
Really young. But so with the second shark film, we're like, okay, we learned a lot from the first one. We didn't want it to be like Jaws, but they kept pulling us back. We wanted hammerheads. They didn't want hammerheads. We didn't want this. They were like, we want great whites. Everyone knows great whites and all these elements. And we got done. And oddly enough, if you watch Shark Attack, there's not a ton of shark attacks in a film called Shark Attack. By the way, that wasn't our original title. We called it Red Tide. They wanted the word shark in the title because shark is great for international films, looks great on a poster. So it made sense. So we listened when people talked about Shark Attack 1. And, we listened to the positives and, of course, the negatives. And I guess you'd say that 2 negatives we got. One, people like, oh, it's a ripoff of Jaws and Deep Blue Sea, which, like, one, we tried not to. And for the record, I didn't read the script to Deep Blue Sea until I was working on the script to Shark Attack 2. We purposely stayed away from it, but it just, if you're dealing with sharks, you're going to be compared to Jaws, obviously.
Right.
And then, in Deep Blue Sea. So we're like, let's step away from that. And we also said, you know what? Let's have a bit more fun. Let's not take ourselves too seriously. And so when we did Shark Attack 2, we're like, let's come up with some crazy ass attacks. They said there weren't enough attacks. Let's nail them with attacks. And we said, let's come up with attacks they've never seen. So we came up and we started off like, all right, we know it's going to be the sharks. And we're going to have we came up with an idea of a 6-pack of sharks with one lead shark, which we gave the name Scar, and it had a scar in its eye, the only way you could tell it apart. And we're like, let's come up with great attacks. So we came up with a series of attacks that we're really proud of. The underwater cage scene where the shark's ripping the guy out. And some of the other attacks, but the one I really enjoyed was the surfing attack. If you see Shark Attack 2, there's a scene where actually 2 attack scenes slammed together because they took out the scene we had in the middle. But there's a surfing competition, and where the sharks attack a surfing competition, which is great and it's bloody and it's fun. But I will tell you, it was not the original idea for the attack sequence because I think that sequence was just recently done. My thing was, why don't we have the sharks attack the water leg of an Ironman triathlon where you've got 1,000 people in the water and no way to get them out, and the sharks are just going to eat people like popcorn. And we're starting to write this thing, and I looked at Will, I said, budget, dude. No way they're going to be able to pull this off as well as we want. It's going to look kind of cheesy,
right. So
let's bring it in. Let's keep that concept of can't get the people out of the water, and that's how we did the surfing attack, which was fun. And I think they have done, Under Paris did something along those lines with it. But yeah, so those types of fun attacks and the attacks underwater and all that. And we just had a lot of fun with Shark Attack 2. And we actually embraced the idea of like, people are going to say we're ripping off Jaws, so let's have fun with it. Let's play with their expectations. If you watch Shark Attack 2, there are tons of inside jokes and references. Most of the characters are named after people we know. And the lead character is named after my niece, who was born the night I finished the screenplay. We named our friends were the people who got killed. One friend, the Hootie character is named after Brian Hoodenpile, a friend of mine. The villain was named after a lawyer I knew. So we named him after everyone. There's so many inside
really
jokes.
cool.
There's a South Park reference in there. That's why we have a character named Kenny getting killed.
That's
and
amazing.
we embraced the cheese, for
Yeah,
lack of a better word.
sure.
Like, we're a B film. Let's have fun with that.
Yes.
And so we did that with part 2, and then we continued that in part 3. Part 3, I really put in my, I guess you'd say my Jaws homage or twist. There's a scene early on. Actually, there's two scenes in Shark Attack 3. I know I'm rambling, but I can talk about this forever.
Please.
Two scenes in Shark Attack 3 that are direct homages to Jaws. The first one is I had two skinny dippers. And the skinny dippers go in and the shark comes. Of course, that's a throwback to the original Jaws. The Chrissy character goes in the water, gets eaten. It's the first scene of Jaws. So I'm like, I've got two people in there skinny dipping. One, hey, it's a shark movie, R-rated. There we go. We get some gratuitous nudity. Yay. But we've got a skinny dipper. So everyone's expecting the shark to come and get the skinny dippers. The twist we threw was shark is coming to get them, but our shark comes in and gets the other shark.
Interesting.
And then I had another scene was an homage to the scene in Jaws where there's the beach attack, where the Alex Kintner kid is attacked. And my heart went out to Pippet, the dog. Which you ask people like, no, Pippet lived. I was like, I don't know. We saw a floating stick. I think Pippet was shark chow. And so in that one, I'm like, I want to do the flip side of that. Rather than a person playing catch with the dog and the dog gets it, I want the person to get it.
Interesting.
And that's what happens in the film, is the guy throws the thing into the water and the shark is smart enough to go, and the person goes in and then they get attacked by the shark. Little aside, when I wrote that scene, that was going to be my cameo. I said, I want to get killed in one of my own films. Originally, I told Dave Worth, you've got to get me over where we film it. Let me play the guy who gets killed by the shark. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. But, there was those types of things. So we really had a lot of fun with 2 and 3. Just, again, embracing what they were. They were always meant to be films. People say, well, it's not of the level of a huge Hollywood thing. I'm like, it never was. It was never meant to be. We knew what it was going to be, and we had fun with it. I'm a fan of B films. Yeah. So when someone says you made a B film, I always want to say, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. No, and it serves its purpose so well, and it's just an amazing, entertaining experience, and ultimately that's what movies are for. So
it is. I got one little side story here you'll laugh at. So if you watch, the first Shark Attack 2, the original opening of the film was an attack scene that I wrote that got cut, which was two sisters. They were going to be sailboarding, the surfboard, and the attack happened there. And unfortunately, they said, it's going to be hard to do. We just got a whole bunch of underwater footage of classic wrecks and all that. Can you redo the opening with that? We said, sure. So we wrote it for that. And the character who gets killed in that opening scene is a character named Amy. Amy is the name of my high school girlfriend. And oh my God, bitter guy. No, here's the thing. So when I was in high school, my girlfriend at the time, I took to prom and all that, Amy, she was going to go off to the Coast Guard Academy. And so we used to joke. I said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go off. You're going to be in the Coast Guard. You're going to be captain of your own ship. You're going to find the biggest shark in the world, and it's going to swallow you and your boat whole. And we laughed about it and all that. So when the time came for Shark Attack 2, it said to me, yep, I'm naming it after her. So I wrote the script. I sent her the pages.
I was literally going to say, do you think she knows?
She loved it. She thought it was hysterical.
That's amazing.
So I'm still friends with her to this day. Her and her husband, I just saw them last year. And so we did the scene. And it worked out. And I remember being on a talk show. And I told this story. And they said, oh, wow. This was when it had only been Shark Attack 2. And they said, so he did that. They're like, are there going to be more sequels? I said, I got a lot of ex-girlfriends, so yeah. So I always tell people, if I love you, I kill you off in my movies in horrible ways. So I've killed off a lot of my friends and family members in the Shark
That's
movies.
incredible.
I love that.
Little aside there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. To take a step over to the more business side of this.
Oh, let's get serious.
And you could say as much or as little on this as you want, because
Sure.
this might be kind of personal information. But the thing that we're trying to understand, we both really care about writing and want to be writers in some capacity. And we were curious, how did the compensation work for the Shark Attack films? Like, was it your flat fee plus residuals? And is that still common today? And how does that work?
Well, I mean, the industry now is much different than it was back then. When Will and I did the deal on Shark Attack 1, we were considered, even though we wrote the original treatment, all that, in essence, it was a work for hire. Mm-hmm. So, which meant they made a contract for us. They would pay us a certain amount for each draft.
Right.
And as long as we fulfilled our obligation, we got paid. And the only way for more money to be made was if they added another step. And actually, they did add an additional draft of Shark Attack. There were three full drafts and a polish. And then we had a production bump. When the film got greenlit, we got a certain amount of money. since we weren't WGA, we actually didn't get standard back end. But again, I said at the time when Shark Attack, we did the initial deal, it was 1995. I was 26 years old. I practically would have paid them to do it.
Yeah.
So what we ended up getting, they made good. We got all the money for the film, and our contract stipulated that we had the rights to first refusal on any sequel, prequels, and spinoffs, meaning they had to come to us first. And it was built in. They didn't have a price bump built into the contract. It was called a price floor, meaning they couldn't drop the price.
Yeah.
Because if you do that to protect the person, they come and say, well, we want you to write the script. We're going to make you write it for $1.
Right.
They can't. So the worst they could offer was what they did. So when Shark Attack was incredibly popular, they came back, and for Shark Attack 2, they said, we want to engage you for the deal. We said, okay. And we asked what other stuff it could be. They said, well, this is where it's going to be because the budget on the film is going to be lower. We said, okay. And then it came for the third one. And they did say we were going to do this one for even less. Would you be guys willing to do it for less? And I said, guys, you can't ask us to do it for less. We have a contract with a price floor. I said, here's what I will do. I will write you that script for $1, provided I direct and I get DGA scale, which they said, they had David Worth, who was a DP and director, so they're already getting 2 for 1. He had done a great job with Shark Attack 2, and they wanted him, so they passed on that, and they made our deal. So we did the 3 films, and we got our basic, our writing fee and our production bump. The films were incredibly popular. They made a lot more money for New Image than we ever saw. I remember there was an article in the LA Times, I think in 2006, 2007, where Avi Lerner said, they were talking about all the films, and he had said in there, I've been part of 260 films over my career, and the single most profitable film I ever made was Shark Attack, based on the amount of money spent to the amount of money they made. So to this day, never got rich off of the Shark Attack films, but that was never the goal.
Right.
The goal was, I can make a living doing what I love. Awesome.
Well, and
so
you got a wealthy experience.
I will tell you a funny story. So the back end we did get, and it's not your standard back end. When films play on television overseas, the money's kind of put into a big pool, and then based on it, where it's shown all that, it's drawn out of there, and that is overseen by the WGA. So cut to about a year or so after I think Shark Attack 2 came out, I get a phone call from the WGA. And he said, we're looking for Scott Devine. I'm like, you got him? And they said, yeah, it's the WGA. We want you to know we have basically foreign copyright money for you for the Shark Attack films. Excellent. I love getting money I didn't know about. And I said, I got my writing partner. And I said, cool. And they're like, all right, well, we just need your address. And I gave him my address. And we're talking, and I'm like, hold on a second. I said, do me a favor. What are we talking here? And he goes, 50. Now, if you hear 50, what are you thinking?
So
I thought...
I would naturally assume in the film industry, 50,000.
Right, same here. Now, Shark Attack, when it came out, but Shark Attack was made for several $1 million, depending on, which figure you go with.
Yeah.
But Shark Attack was, before it even left AFM, it was in profit 4 or 5 times over, well in the black. So when I heard 50, I said, 50,000. I said, 50,000? He went, cents. I said, 50 cents. I said, okay.
That's crazy.
And I said, I've got a writing partner. Does he get a quarter and I get a quarter? He's like, no, you get the same. I said, awesome. I said, I have an agent. Do I have to send him I'm just having fun with him. This is hysterical.
Yeah.
Do I have to send him a nickel?
His
and they're
percent
like,
fee.
no. That's it's up to you. And I said, what's WGA's policy when the postage to send the check is equivalent to 80% of the check's worth? And we just had a laugh about it. There used to be a bar in LA called Residuals, where if you ever had a residual check or whatever for less than $1, you gave it to them, they would put it up on the wall, they'd give you a drink. I didn't get there for that. But that said, that money did go up. And actually, I got checks up as recently as about 3-4 years ago. I would get checks twice a year in February and November. And there were times, the checks were worth a couple $1,000 or a couple $100. I would get it, and Will would get the same.
Yeah.
So we never never got rich off of it. But we did get some. And anytime you get a check in the mail that you're not expecting, it's found money. It's like, dun, 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 dun. How much is this?
Yeah.
I'm going out to lunch,
Yeah,
or
that's
want like
awesome.
bought me a PlayStation 3. But you know, that's what it is. And I will say this: I never got in this industry to be rich and or famous. If it happens, bonus. But I just did this because I love doing it. So, so in regards to compensation, now it's a really roundabout way to get back there. It's a tough industry now, and things have changed a lot. With the decrease of B films and all that, AFM is a lot harder. It's a lot harder to get financing. You have the streaming services, and there's a lot of stuff where everything seems to be contracting.
Yeah.
And there really is a much bigger disparity between what the top people are making and the bottom. It's kind of like the middle class is really being forced out of the industry. It's really hard. From what happened with the pandemic, pretty much shut the industry down for about 2 years. The strike, which was necessary, absolutely, it shut things down for almost a year. And they said, as soon as that's done, we're going to come back to the levels we thought we were, and we still haven't. And I don't know when we will. Actually, I think we need to find a new norm. And of course, the bottom falling out of the streamers. What do you mean? There's streamers everywhere, but it's a business model that actually doesn't help out the person who is the day-to-day worker on films.
Sure.
Actors don't make the types of residuals off those shows like they used to. The idea of going into syndication, it's a really, really challenging way to make money these days. It's harder than ever to be in the industry, unfortunately. But that said, it's like a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
We have the ups and we have the downs. Around the strike times, there's no work to be found. When we had the boom of streaming services early on, everything was getting made. Well, now we're seeing a contraction, and we're seeing these the grouping of streamers together.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, we had a word for that years ago. It's called cable.
We love
Careful
the
what you
film
wish for.
industry.
You might just get it. So the thing is this. If you are good at what you do and can create something, there's always going to be a need. Now, of course, also, I'm going to say this. Let's throw in the whole AI aspect. The idea of having, AI and generative AI and things like that. People are like, is AI going to take our jobs? The answer is, well, AI is a tool like anything else. There is always going to be the need for creativity. And, AI doesn't create anything from scratch. It's told about all these things, and it basically just mashes it up, but it mashes it up faster and with more precision than a human ever could. So I've said this to writing students: let AI be your assistant intelligence, if you want to say. You're writing a script, why not be writing 10? Come up with the initial idea, let AI do some of the heavy lifting for you, and then you go in. I think what you're going to see is now, if people want to use that type of thing, you're going to see a lot of people coming and saying, I'm not looking for you to write a script. I'm looking for script doctors.
Interesting.
So we'll see where it goes. I don't know if that's the thing, but for anyone going in the industry, you need to always stay informed. You need to learn what the trends are. And AI, it's a Pandora's box, or it's a genie's out of the bottle. It's out and it's not going back in. It's like when CG came on, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, is physical, production, physical special effects, makeup effects, stunts, all that, is it gone forever?" Well, CGI is a tool. It's not the right tool for everything. And if you look, a lot of times, CGI works really well when it's done in conjunction with, say, physical effects. The example I'll use is when they did the Force Awakens. They had the BB-8 robot. BB-8, it's a combination of physical and CG. They had a person operating BB-8, usually like a puppet, on set. So they had something for people to interact with, and the physics of it interacting with, whether it's the sand or the people. But behind it, there was a person in a green screen suit, or they had cables coming out of it, and they used, CG to get rid of the person, all that. So it was a combination, and the end result is better than I think either of them could have done on their own.
Sure.
So that's the way I look at what we're having with, say, with AI and all that. Yeah, it's going to remove certain jobs or certain needs, but it also opens other opportunities. I'll give you a little analogy. Are either of you really upset that we really don't have a physical phone operator anymore or person delivering your milk to your door.
No.
Those are jobs that or a vacuum repair person or things like that.
Yeah.
That used to be something that was a job that was basically removed due to technology and automation.
Yeah.
But other jobs open up because of it. So it's going to take some things away, but it's going to open opportunities. And that's the thing of where can I make this work for me?
Yeah.
And I got back up on my soapbox, didn't even know it.
And I do wonder if this is like a similar experience all generations of filmmakers have, but it's just for something different. Like you said, CGI was probably one of them, or the move from film to digital. There's probably like, oh, like the editor's job is going to be so different now, but like different doesn't mean gone.
Absolutely. I mean, when I came up in film school, again, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I shot on film. I cut on film. My thesis film that I did, we shot with a 16 millimeter film camera, an Arri. We did our dailies the traditional way. I cut it on a Steenbeck 6 plate. All that is gone. No one uses. I mean, you're not going to find a physical editor anywhere except in museums and all that.
I didn't follow what you said, really.
Yeah,
There you go. It's all done digitally now. But if you look, like the digital systems mimic some of the aspects of the analog ones. Little example. If you look in like Avid or Adobe Premiere, where do you keep all your clips? It's in a folder. It's called a bin. Like, why a bin? Because in ye olden days, you actually had a physical bin where the film strips were. So it was a way to go from analog to digital.
Right.
And as long as you're there, I'm gonna jump on. I'm gonna sidetrack this for a minute. When we talk about the old way of doing it, if you learn about just doing it by hand, and now we have computers doing it, and people are like, oh, isn't it better now? I'll tell you this: the time it takes to edit a feature film from way back when till now, it's still about the same. What it does is you have the speed and the efficiency of automation. But when I cut way back when, if I consider how I would edit back in ye olden days to now, back then, I was cutting in my head. The whole idea of it took so much time and effort to undo an edit.
Right.
You made certain you knew that edit was going to work before you did it.
Yeah.
So I was thinking for a couple of minutes or so before I would do an edit going, okay. Now you can just throw it up, doesn't work, Command Z back there. I can try 15 different things, but I'm not putting the thought into it that I used to.
Sure.
So what I always like to say, my benefit of, that having the analog and the digital is I have the preparation and the forethought of analog combined with the speed and efficiency of digital, which I always like to say makes me a double threat. Sure, but of course, I also had to adapt from that to this in order to survive. And that's something I always tell my students is your learning doesn't really kick into high gear until after you get out of film school. Because so much of what I learned back then, the physical stuff, obsolete. The gear, when people say, oh, I use this camera, today's cutting edge camera is tomorrow's doorstop. When I came out to Atlanta, relocated here in 2017, I wanted to get a digital copy made of my thesis film from way back when. Well, the actual master of it is a 16 millimeter print that's probably rotting somewhere in a storeroom at Florida State. I'm sure the glue on the splices have come apart and all that. The video master of it was on a format called Betacam SP, which back in the 90s, cutting edge. You probably haven't even heard of it. So it was an analog format. So when I found a place to actually transfer it for me here in Atlanta, the guy said, all right, I have a machine that'll do it. I want you to know I am literally using it as a doorstop. So we'll see if the machine works and can do it, because that didn't work anymore. So fortunately, they were able to get it, dust it off. The machine still worked, and that's how I got my digital version. So I'll say this, future-proof your stuff. Every time you get it done, every couple of years, get it onto the new format, because eventually it's going to be gone. But the idea of the old and the new, combining all that. So it was a really big detour, and but I'm sure there's stuff in there that hopefully people go, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, that was hugely insightful, and
the perfect segue as well for our next kind of topic. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to fast forward, but we're still kind of behind where we are today.
Okay.
DVDs, Blu-ray. So this is something you and I have talked about. Mm-hmm. The three of us have all talked about. How do we distribute films?
How do we distribute films? Well, in, again, ye olden days.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's take the machine back to 70s. early 80s. The way you saw film, theatrical, okay? Domestic, international. Back then, the domestic box office was much greater than the international box office, by the way. That's kind of flipped. What was the secondary market? Well, there was no home entertainment, or just a very basic home entertainment at that point. So it was all about getting on the cable channels, the premium cable channels, HBO, which, is a product of basically the 70s. I remember when I first saw HBO, it was on for about 6 to 7 hours a day. It started about 6 p.m. and it went till about 2 a.m. and then it was static the rest of the time. But the idea of playing on there and then playing on network TV, because cable was still blossoming. Then you had the advent of home entertainment. Early 80s, the VHS cassette comes out.
Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, we had the VHS and the Betamax, the format war. I could go off on that.
Yes.
The two formats fighting for each other. And, Betamax was the better format than VHS. So which one out? VHS. I could do a half hour just telling you why that happened. But the whole idea of the home video cassette, we can now record shows and watch them when we want. That was never an option before. If you wanted to watch Happy Days, it was on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. or Thursday night at 8 p.m. You had to have your butt in the seat at 8 p.m. and watch it.
Yeah.
And if the president came on, well, you were done. And if you missed that episode, maybe you could catch it in a rerun over the summer. But now, not only could you record a show and watch it when you wanted, the advent of the video store. Oh my gosh. I can go to a store and get a movie and watch it when I want. Revolutionary. The rise of the mom and pop video stores, which led to Blockbuster and all that. So then let's jump into, and that was huge, because it was a new revenue stream for the studio. So now a film didn't necessarily have to be hugely profitable in the theaters because it had the secondary market. It was another stop, another place to get revenue. It also allowed the rise of the direct-to-video films. This film is not going to make it in the box office. We're not going to spend the money to put it in, 2,000 theaters and the marketing that's going to take. But if we put it on video, yeah. And so the B movies, which are kind of hearkening back to the B films of the serials and the 50s and all that, became popular. And people love those. And if we jump into DVD, when that came out in the 90s, gangbusters, because VHS originally was a renter's medium, meaning you really didn't buy the movies because they were too expensive. They're about $100 each. Why? Because that's what they said they were worth. So you would rent them and that'd be out. When DVD came out, it was actually set up to be a buyer's medium. The prices were brought down starting at $29.99. So now you don't just rent the movie, you buy it, you own it. It's yours forever. But wait a minute, I just spent all this money, maybe I bought some VHS cassettes. Why should I buy DVDs? Well, all the special things. One, VHS cassettes are big. DVDs are thinner. You don't have to rewind a DVD. It's got better picture. You can pause it, all right? And it's got all the special features. It's got different audio tracks so you can watch it in different languages at the touch of a button. You've got the audio commentary. You've got the making of feature, all this other. You've got the trailers on there. It created this whole other aspect to it. And DVDs were incredibly popular. For several years, they were actually like the biggest source of revenue. The studios are like, you know what? The movie release, theatrical release, is the marketing for DVD. They were making so much stuff. Another thing that was a huge thing for the home entertainment, and actually DVD, television shows. So if you've got 100 episodes of a TV show, that's usually in the olden days, that's when a show would be good for syndication, 100 half-hour episodes or 65 or so hour-long episodes. If I wanted a VHS cassette of that, it'd be 100 VHS. It would be this huge.
Yeah.
But when I could cram a whole bunch of episodes onto here, make this easy to buy, suddenly everybody wanted to buy television shows. In fact, the purchase of certain TV shows on DVD relaunch shows. Family Guy was canceled by Fox. It went off the air, but thanks to it playing on Cartoon Network and DVD, it was so popular, it was brought back, and now it's still on the air to this day. Right. So that type of thing, DVD, became a huge boom to the industry. So you had theatrical, you had DVD, you had the rise of, you still had your premium cable, but then you had a lot of secondary cable, channels like TBS, TNT, FX, and all that were another revenue stream. Because when you make money on a movie, it's basically you're getting little pieces from all over. Just like how you finance. You get a little here, a little there. if I get $10 here, $10 there, $5 there, I put it all together, you can still spend it at the same place. So it gave us a lot of opportunities. Well, with the rise of the internet and all that, the idea of streaming, okay? The idea of still presenting content, but instead of having it on a physical disc, ding, 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 or on a VHS cassette, slap, 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 whatever it would make if you put plastic on wood, the idea of getting it through your computer. And I remember seeing streaming stuff as early as 2000. I worked on a short film that was designed to be just for the internet. But back then, speeds were so slow, the window on your screen was only about that big. It had to be really, really tiny because it took so much. And if you think of Netflix in its early days, it was all about renting the DVDs, and then eventually they got it up where they could do streaming. And streaming is not as old as some people think. I mean, the first really big streaming series that I remember of was House of Cards, with Kevin Spacey on. I think that was 2013 around there. And that's when it really started dropping, and there started being the change. But the writing was on the wall that this is where they were going, and that physical media had a limited lifespan. The CEO of Blockbuster basically said, knowing how streaming was going to go, that our model had an expiration date. So that went on, and now it's gotten into streaming, and now we have all the apps and the services, and it's made it harder for films and all that and necessarily to make money. Because if you have a movie that comes out, say, on Netflix, a Netflix original, all right, how much money does that movie make?
Right. It's not directly receiving
not directly,
income.
Right.
Yeah.
If I, a film that's at the box office, you look at the box office tallies, those Tuesday things I said in Box Office, Hollywood Reporter.
Yeah.
There it is. It made $100 million this weekend. That's how much money came in at the box office. The exhibitors take their piece. Everyone else takes their pieces. You get the chump change. That's what the film is made. So if the film does really, really well, if it does, let's say this, Deadpool and Wolverine or Joker won money, oh my gosh, we spent this amount and it made this amount. It's hugely profitable. Mm-hmm. Conversely, if the film doesn't do well, like Joker 2 or other films, it's a bit of a loss, but we might be able to make it up from other markets. If I make a film that's for Netflix, okay, the movie costs $100 million to make. How much money does it make? Well, it doesn't actually make its own funds. It's the whole thing is Netflix is trying to keep people to subscribe. So all the subscribers put in basically create this giant pool, and the goal of a film like, say, films that come out on there, whether it's Six Underground or any of those films that they make, or it's to keep people as subscribers of Netflix. Yeah. So there isn't that big back end. Those people who want the back end deals, the profit participation, it's just not there in the model for that. And that's what's made it harder. So now when we're looking at this day, theatrical was really banged up by the pandemic. We still haven't returned quite to those numbers. Don't know if we ever will. I'm glad that the theaters are still around at the level they are. I wonder what the future will hold when we've got so many films are premiering on streaming and all that, because it takes so much money to launch a film. So I don't know what the future is going to hold. The physical media, it's become kind of a niche market. Oddly enough, it's going to be around, but it's going to be like vinyl, records. So, records were all the rage until CDs came out, and then CDs blew vinyl out of the water, and everyone was getting CDs. Well, CDs are basically gone. If you look, they still make them, but everyone gets their music through subscription services. It's hard to buy a DVD now. Right. They're not selling them at Best Buy. They're not selling them at most places, maybe a little display. Same thing with DVDs. They don't sell DVDs at Best Buy anymore. It's only certain stores or online, but there is still a need for physical media. Go back to the vinyl thing. Vinyl made a comeback when people realized there was something about vinyl that DVDs couldn't quite capture. Right. Since it's digital CDs, it's 1 or 0, on or off. So you could really see it was in essence kind of cold, but with vinyl, you could get that kind of, that sound bleeding through and that kind of analog feeling if you had a really good sound system. Well, if you don't know, actually, vinyl has now passed CD sales. So if you look at, for music, if there's a physical media, vinyl is number 1.
Wow. That's interesting.
Now, the thing with DVDs, DVDs are basically, really becoming small. But you're going to have companies like Criterion, Shout Factory, other ones. I mean, some I've worked for, unfortunately, have gone away. A company like Alva Films, where they'll take films, and in essence, they will go to the studio saying, can we release this? And they're made for filmophiles. People say, well, I don't need the physical media. I've got the streaming services. Well, how many programs have you loved are suddenly bouncing from one service to another? And what you subscribe to today, now it's on a different service.
Yeah.
Or stuff that's disappeared entirely. If you don't have the physical media, you don't have it. If you have the physical media, they can't take it away. A little note, if you buy something on, say, like iTunes or whatever, you say, I own it. Actually, you really don't. You have an indefinite rental. But that stuff can disappear.
Yes.
Of course, if the internet goes out or whatever, or they go in and change the films, there you go. I mean, so much of the content I created, because I got into doing BTS and DVD special features. I did that for 15 years. I worked on dozens and dozens of feature films, television series, animated series. It represents the biggest portion of my career. So much of that stuff I created on the DVDs is, in one sense, gone. If you don't have the physical disc, that content just doesn't exist. I still have it, and I can show people, but I really wish there was an avenue for people to see my making of Dawn of the Dead, or my my featurette on the making of stuff for the original, for Batman the Animated Series, or things like that. But it's a changing world, and unfortunately, so many decisions are driven by the almighty dollar. The entertainment industry, unfortunately, is the intersection of business and creativity, and they don't always play nice together. And unfortunately, what's going to win out in the end?
Money.
Yeah.
Cash thing. That's why the films we see so often, they're franchises or things that are safe bets, and it's harder to get something original made because it's a risk. And when you've got big companies, they're risk averse.
Right.
Got on the soapbox again.
A million questions have come to my mind from this. I think the first thought on this recent idea we've talked about not owning it forever, or things coming off of streaming platforms. I heard the story that there was a film released by Disney on Disney Plus, and it wasn't performing particularly great. And it was actually costing Disney more to keep it up. And this was a brand new film, by the way, like 2023. It was costing them more to keep it on the platform than they could attribute revenue to it. And so they took it away. The film is gone. It's mind-blowing to me that a film that came out a year ago can be gone.
Yeah. Well, what they'll do is when the streaming platforms first came out, all right, Netflix is attributed the idea of showing that the streaming service can work. They came in to break the model, and they did. Unfortunately, Netflix also never really figured out the way to make this financially sustainable. And we're finding that now. So what happened is, they were, their whole thing was they were showing everybody else's content. If you looked originally at Netflix back in, 2013, 2014, it was just a few little shows that they had started producing, but it was everything from the various studios. Well, then the studios got wise, going, wait a minute. Why should we give it to them when we can do it ourselves? And in essence, Netflix became a victim of their own success.
Right.
So suddenly, the studio is saying, we're going to take this back, and we're going to take this back, and we're going to make our own. Okay? And suddenly, and for giving them credit, they realized we better start making our own stuff. We need, in essence, become a studio because they're going to take it back. I mean, Disney. Disney made a big push, and it was a limited push. They originally had all their, every studio had a premium cable channel that they would put their stuff on. Warner Brothers had HBO. Other ones used Movie Channel, Showtime, Encore, Stars. Disney released all their stuff on Stars. So when it went theatrical there, and then they had home entertainment, and then when it got a home premium channel release, premium video on demand or premium subscription, it would go to Stars. Well, suddenly they took it off, and they were the first studio to put all their stuff on a streaming platform only, and it was Netflix. But if you look, Disney content only stayed on Netflix for a couple of years. Why? They wanted to see if it was viable while Disney Plus, or the original iteration of it, was being created. And once they saw that, they said, great, thank you for showing us. We're going to take our ball and go home. And so that type of stuff. So it worked that everybody circled the wagons. So Warner Brothers took all the stuff off of the other sites and put it on HBO Go, and then it was HBO Max, and now just Max, which I have to say I'm really not a fan of the name. I grew up on HBO. I still look at Max, and in my mind, it still says HBO. And they put all their content there. And then Disney put all their content on Disney Plus, and Paramount pulled it off, and it was CBS All Access, then Paramount Plus. And they said, you want our stuff, you have to watch it here. What do you see now? There's Warner Brothers content on Netflix. There's Disney content there. Stuff across, you see the Harry Potter films and stuff for Universal and all that. They're basically saying, how do we make money when it's not going here and all that? They'll pay for it. So that show that was taken off, you might see that pop up on a competitor service, but there's only so many subscription services that you can have.
Right.
People are only willing to do so many things.
But yeah, and I noticed like DreamWorks stuff on Disney Plus, and like DC stuff on Disney Plus, which like Disney owns Marvel, like the main competitor. So it's the lines are starting to blur.
We're going back to that type of thing. You know, really what it is you're looking at them trying to figure it out. Actually, you know what is incredibly popular now, and I'll tell this to upcoming filmmakers. You want to find a platform to go on? AVOD, advertising video on demand. The services like Tubi, Pluto, things like that. The ones that have ads on it. Why? What do they cost you?
Nothing.
Are you willing to sit through ads?
Yes, sir.
If it's free? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now on the premiums things, you're sitting through ads and
ads
paying
anyways,
for it.
yeah.
What they're actually doing is, this is what Netflix did. I'm going off a little tangent here. It disrupted the traditional model that we had. For theatrical, it was the box office taking the draw from there. For television, things like HBO, it was the subscription, but it was meant to be, not for everybody. It was premium. You watched it on standard cable or a network, and where did they make their money? From the advertising. Advertisers would pay and all that. Well, when they said we're just going to have it on the streaming services, you're only going to get so many subscribers. And that was the thing. They had to keep making new content to keep the subscribers they had. You couldn't maintain it. So that's why, how do we get more revenue? Well, we're going to put ads. Well, now people are like, well, I don't like the idea of paying money for the channel and having ads when I used to get the content for free.
Right.
Just having ads. So that's why things like, Tubi and all that are killing it now. Because the idea is it doesn't really cost them as much because they're going to get money from the advertisers. So, the way it's working now, I would say to upcoming filmmakers, if you can get yourself on some of those platforms, because the students I know, they don't have a lot of money and they can only afford one or two. And, I remember paying $8 a month for Netflix when it was the DVDs and the streaming early on. And then they split it. Now I'm paying $23 a month just for Netflix. That's a lot. And it wasn't that long ago. I was only paying $8. And so that adds up. So if I have, Netflix and Max and Paramount Plus and Disney Plus and a lot of other channels with pluses on it and all that stuff and Amazon Prime, I look at all that and then I still have to pay for my internet. Right. I look at that. I'm paying more now for television than I ever did before, and I still don't have it all. So the idea of, the distribution and all that going forward, it's figured out. I think right now they're still trying to figure it out. Ask me this question again in 5 years. But I'd say right now, the ones to look at are the free ones, because what you're seeing on there are classic television shows. And people are liking that. And that's why the streamers are going, why do we have to create so much content? We have all this old content that we can utilize. So
yeah,
It's fascinating.
the world is changing, and the industry is still trying to figure out where it's going to be, and it hasn't found that point yet. So we're in a time of contraction and growing pains.
Okay.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
I think.
Hope I didn't bust anybody's
No,
bubbles out
you're
there.
so
this
good.
this has been incredible, and I think to swing us back in this idea of storytelling. Do you have any insights when it comes to the overlap of the way media is distributed and the way we tell stories? And like something that we were talking about was the way that like TV shows work. Back in cable, it felt like the episodes could be a lot less linear, so that if you like missed one or something, you weren't totally screwed out of watching the whole thing.
Yep.
Whereas now, it feels a lot more like a movie, where like if I missed an episode, I have no idea what's going on.
Right, yeah. It used to be that's what they would want when they would create television shows way back when. Either they're called episodic or procedurals. The idea that really, the universe at the end of the episode is the exact same at the beginning. Something happens, and at the end, it doesn't really change the overall dynamic. There might be one or two little things that permeate through the rest of the season, but the idea was you could show it in any order, which was great for when it hits syndication. Because in syndication, it might end up in whatever order and all that stuff, and you can't trust people to be there 5 days a week or whatever.
Right, sure.
So that lent itself. The idea of having these things where a serial, where one follows after the other, I have to tell you, personally, I love it, but there is that issue that if you miss a couple of episodes, I'm lost. I remember the very first, I guess you'd say serial thing that I ever watched was as a little kid, an anime show. An anime show called Star Blazers, which was based on the Japanese series Space Battleship Yamato. And it was the idea that they had a year to complete this mission. What I loved is at the end of every episode, they'd say, hurry up, there are only this many days left. And every episode, the number of days went down, and the story followed itself. In essence, it was one big episode. And I like that because it allows the development of characters over that amount of time. But there is that challenge of, do I have to watch it all in order, or what if I miss it? There were certain shows where I missed a season or two, and I'm like, I don't want to start up now because I haven't seen it from the beginning. So I'll go back and watch all those. The whole concept of binge watching, created by Netflix, the idea of capturing that. A little aside, I remember my introduction to binge watching when it wasn't binge watching. It was in the DVD era. I was a huge fan of 24, but when it first came out, I missed the first year or two. And I'm like, I really want to catch up. But that's a show that's done serial style. So I wanted to do that. But then I got hired to do the DVDs for a television series called La Femme Nikita, which was the series a lot of those guys who did 24 had made prior to going to 24. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I can't go and interview these guys for La Femme Nikita without knowing 24, because I was going to go onto the set of 24. We'd go off into other rooms, but so I went to CTU and all that. So I had to catch up on like 2 or 3 seasons before I started. So I went out and bought the box set DVD. And I remember, back before that term was big, binge watching them. In the sense that I had a treadmill. I was just getting into running back then. I had a treadmill in my apartment, so I'd wake up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m., had a roommate at that time, put my headphones on and be on the treadmill working out, and I'd watch 5 or 6 episodes in a row, and I blew through like 3-4 seasons in like 2 weeks. And it was great, and I loved it. Of course, the one thing I also found out is, if I ever had a day like one season of 24, which is over one day, oh my gosh, relationships would start, flourish, and end over the course of a day. Yeah. A person would be tortured within, just practically to death's door, and 2 hours later, they're working like nothing ever happened, because I'm like, well, it's 2 weeks later. I'm like, I slam my finger in the door. I'm done for the day.
Yeah.
So
that show is amazing. I really love it.
I was a huge fan of 24, and having a chance to work, meet the creators and talk with them about the other shows. And by the way, there's the original La Femme Nikita with Peter Wilson and all them is a show people should watch if they can find it. One, because I did the DVD and you can see my stuff on it, but a lot of the stuff that was in 24, they were going to try and do in La Femme Nikita. They wanted to do La Femme Nikita in real time, but they couldn't quite make it work. And then the idea of them not having paper, everything's done on screens and tablets. That was something they came up with in La Femme Nikita. And if you watch in La Femme Nikita, the show was set up that it was always, the mission was an hour away from wherever they were. You could always, it's like, where the heck is this thing? Where is, the main, the headquarters of Section 1 and all that? Yeah. And it turned out I think it was in Paris. I think one episode you saw a reflection of the Eiffel Tower. But I digress on that. But the idea of serial filmmaking now is really a lot of fun. The limited series. Again, what's old is new. A lot of people say, wow, this is really cool, this style of filmmaking. We had this years ago in the 70s and 80s called a miniseries. Everyone was raging about, have you seen Shogun on FX? I'm like, no, I saw Shogun back in the 70s with, Richard Chamberlain on ABC. It was 12 hours spread over 5 nights. Oh my God, it was wonderful. Yeah. The idea of the miniseries, V and things like that. Now when we have these limited series, it's the modern day equivalent of the miniseries. Stephen King's The Stand was 4 nights that Mick Garris directed in the 90s. 4 nights on ABC. Now it was 10 episodes on Paramount Plus. Little shout out to Mick, by the way, who I'm a huge fan of the work he's done over the years. He survived the apocalypse not once but twice. In the original Stand, his character, he played a small part, because why not put yourself in it, and survived. And then in the remake they did a couple of years ago on Paramount Plus, the filmmakers brought him in. He's in a cameo. He's in the town where he survived. So I'm like, he survived Captain Trips twice.
That's
so
awesome.
Mick Garris
really
is a
cool.
bit of a badass.
Yes, sir.
There's
For
so
days.
many avenues for this, but yeah, in the spirit of time, I think
Okay.
let's move on
I'm not
to
wearing a watch, so I'm
this
good.
feature documentary you did with DC.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. All right. So, can you walk us through how you ended up in the position to co-direct and produce your documentary with DC?
Necessary Evil, supervillains of DC
Yes,
Comics. Again, another thing I love. I have been a comic book junkie ever since I can remember. I mean, as a little kid, I had all the comic books and read them growing up. I remember I kind of got away from it for about 2 or 3 years when I was a teenager because I was too cool for anything. But when I got to college, one day one of the guys who lived in my dorm said, "Hey, Scott, I'm gonna go to a comic book store down there. You want to come?" I had nothing to do. I said, I used to love comic books. Yeah. I mean, I was a fan of the classic Batman, Superman, Crisis on Infinite Earths, all that stuff. I said, sure. And I went with him to a comic book store in Madison, Wisconsin, where I was going to college. And we went in, and I walked around. I picked up a handful of comics just to read. And for better or for worse, one of the comics I picked up was The Killing Joke. First edition, written by Alan Moore, an excellent writer. This incredible new take on the origin of the Joker, and I got a Superman one and all that. And I went home. I had about 2 or 3 books, spent about $10, $15, and I read them. And the next day I went back to the store and dropped about $50 to $100. And then I did not miss a week of comic book collecting for 25 years. That's every week, like paperwork. So I am a huge comic book nerd. I am a geek. I've been a fan of that forever. And I was thrilled when during DVDs I got to work on some of the seminal Warner Brothers animated series. I did the DVDs for Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited, Legion of Superheroes, some of the original Super Friends, The Batman, Teen Titans. So I got to be, it was just a dream for me, and I got to be really good friends and work with a lot of these great creators, people like Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, and so many of the others who worked on it. Dan Reba, oh my gosh, just this litany of names of people who made these great shows who loved this as much as I did. So I could geek out with them,
Yes,
and it was fun. So the way it actually came to be was found out about the idea that Warner Brothers or DC Comics and Warner Home Entertainment wanted to do a feature documentary on the bad guys, and this was brought to me by a person I worked with, a really good friend of mine, J.M. Kenny, who knew I was a huge comic book geek. We had pitched a couple of other things to DC, that some that went, some that didn't go, and I can't talk about those. They asked us to pitch for this documentary. At the time, it wasn't called Necessary Evil. It's just they had a directive where they were going to have all the bad guys. So I jumped into it, and I thought about, what do I, as a fanboy, want to know about these things? And I came up with the idea of, that really, the idea that the villains are, originally the original title we had was called Dark Reflections. The idea that the villain is a reflection of the hero, and that really the villains drive the stories.
Yes.
Alan Burnett gave a great quote on the documentary talking about how if a protagonist is designated as a person who sets the story in motion, and the antagonist is the one who opposes him, then the villains are the protagonists, and the heroes are the antagonists, because the villains put the plan in motion and all that. And there's the great concept of the hero has to win every time. The villain only has to win once. That was a quote from Dan from DC Comics on the DVD. So I came up with this huge proposal, and I was going to bring all the people I knew to do interviews on that, all the people I'd worked with on the DC animated shows, people like James Tucker and things like that, and bring them on and pick their brains and get the people from the films and all that. And at that time, Zack Snyder had done Man of Steel. I'm like, well, hopefully we'll get him, because I'd worked on the DVD for Dawn of the Dead and all these people. And I did this pitch, and it was like 20 pages long, and worked with JM and with the company Motion to make it look really nice, and we sent the proposal off. So we sent it off, and by the way, over that time we delivered, I had relocated to Atlanta for the first time. This was back in 2012, and I had a teaching opportunity there. I said I wanted to teach, and I thought, let me give it a try. My family was all living in Atlanta. Atlanta was starting to get into the idea of doing some production here, not at the level we have now.
Sure.
And I came here, and I got a phone call from JM and saying, they really like the pitch.
Wow.
In fact, it's on a short list. It's like us and 2 others. We want to fly you back to LA to come in and pitch the concept to all the execs of DC and Warner Home Entertainment.
Wow.
That's huge.
I'm in.
That's incredible.
And so we set it up, and I was getting ready to go, and I had the car picking me up to take me to the airport. And the phone rings, and it's JM. He's like, I got good news and bad news. I'm like, oh, damn it. Either the pitch has been delayed or whatever. And he's like, well, the bad news is the reason we were bringing you to LA is it's not really valid anymore. I said, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, they don't want the pitch. They bought our idea. We're doing the documentary. You're still coming, but now it's to talk about it. So I was like, that was one of the best plane rides ever. I'm flying.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, we sold this thing. And so we got in there, and I got in the big room, and there were about 15 execs, and I was at the head with JM, and all excited to pitch the idea. And in walks Jeff Johns, who was the chief creative director at DC at the time, or one of the heads there for creative content. And Jeff is a great comic book writer. When you have legendary people like him and Jim Lee at DC and all that. So he came into the room and sat down. And was like, oh. And I had not met him up to that point. And he took the proposal, and he's like, whoever wrote this gets it. And they said, it's Scott. And he went, yeah. And then we went on from there.
That's so cool.
And actually, I'll tell you, one of the interviews, the interview I did with Jeff was great. It ended up being a 2-hour interview. Only the first hour was really our content of going over all the stuff, because Jeff was a writer on Flash, and of course very well known for the Green Lantern comic series and all that. And the first hour was us doing the interview for the comic book, and then we geeked out. We kind of left the script and just started talking about stories we love and all that. And I remember after we did this for like 45 minutes, just episodes we love and the villains we love and these rare things.
so
And we got done, and JM's like, yeah, you lost all of us 45 minutes ago. It's like the 2 of you were just like having a geek discussion. I'm like, but that's the fun. And so, so we did that, and it was a great experience. I got to go around and talk to a lot of comic book writers, people like Scott Snyder, and all that, and hear their stories. Oh, and the legendary Len Wein, who passed away not too long after. People like got to talk to him, who's a legendary creator. Marv Wolfman, people I grew up talking to, and having those geek moments. Getting to talk to Richard Donner, who directed the original Superman, talking Superman with Dick Donner, sitting down and talking with Clancy Brown, who does the voice of Lex Luthor. And oh my gosh, this was
It's just not real.
It was
That's
outrageous. And talking to these people, and for the documentary also brought in a couple of pop culture psychologists who specialize in this, Travis Langley and Andrea Letamendi, who are so well known in talking about the mental state of fictional characters. And we did this whole thing, and it was a great experience. I got to work with the people at DC. I got to go into their archives. Oh my gosh. And I'm looking in the room, like there's the original copy of Action comics with Superman in it, and Detective Comics with Batman. I'm like, there's a lot of money in that case. And doing all that, and then the moment that really sold it for me that was great is I go to Comic-Con every year.
Yes.
And Comic-Con is, it's our geek Super Bowl. And it's in San Diego and fly in. And in 2013, we got to do a panel and a screening of a cut down of Necessary Evil. And by the way, the person who ended up doing our voiceover narration for it, Christopher Lee. I mean, oh my gosh, I got to do a recording session with Christopher Lee. Just talking film with a legend, a Hollywood legend like Christopher Lee. It was great. And sitting up there in front of several hundred people, showing them 20 minutes of Necessary Evil and saying, hey, go out and pick it up. And then listening to questions and people and being up there where I remember being in the audience watching all the panels and now I'm up there geeking out. Oh, it's a thrill. So everything about that and when it premiered and did really, really well and all that, it was a blast. And here's a perfect thing. On Blu-ray and DVD, and it was on Max. It got pulled off a couple of months ago. So right now, if you want to watch Necessary Evil, you can pay to download it on, I think, Amazon Prime, but it's not on any subscription service that I know of. And that is a shame. Granted, it's 10 years old and all that, but bring it back. There's still stuff on there that's a lot of fun. And also listening to people like Len and hearing Christopher, all the people who have passed away and aren't with us anymore.
Yeah.
So.
That was
really
such
amazing.
a beautiful story. And
Freak it out a little bit.
yeah, there's so much there to unpack. And so you spent a lot of time in both narrative storytelling and now with this thing you did with DC, documentary storytelling as well. Obviously, these are two very different mediums. So how does this work when it comes to the differences? Yeah, see, we got, the Diet Coke's flying
If you want
in.
me to come talk, just make certain you have an unlimited supply
So-
of no-name soda. You know the brand.
This was our sales pitch.
there you go.
We said
We
we'll
are in
have Diet
Atlanta.
Coke, and we made it happen. But what are kind of some of the differences when it comes to how you tackle those two different mediums?
Well, if you go with the narratives, things like the Shark Attack movies, and like I said, I spent a lot of time doing Blu-ray. Actually, it was DVD and then into Blu-ray. I even did a little 1HD DVD, if anyone remembers that. Doing behind-the-scenes content, which is really much more. It's marketing pieces. It's the making of, which I love the stories because the stories of making a film sometimes are as interesting, and in some cases more interesting, than the film itself. Yeah. But hearing the making of is a lot of fun. But in essence, it's documentary. It's capturing stories that other people are telling as opposed to coming up with your own stories. That said, you do find opportunities to tell things in an interesting way. And I did get to do some original narrative content on some of the DVDs. I did 2 narrative things for Dawn of the Dead. We did a mock newscast about how the zombies are taking over. And we actually got a piece of it, a thing called... I think it's Andy's tape or whatever. It's the story of one of the characters from the movie Dawn of the Dead. It's his untold story, which we worked with. We had the collaboration of Max Brooks, who wrote Zombie Survival Guide and World War Z, and all that, and had Zack Snyder involved to create some narrative stuff. So I do have the opportunities to do some of that. But yeah, they are two different beasts. But to me, it's about film in general, whether I'm doing something that's tied to narrative. I love narrative, don't get me wrong. But the making of its own stories. And there are differences between the two of them. Certain things I like on one that are great that maybe aren't there in the others and vice versa. So it is apples and oranges. But there's aspects I like of each of them. But the one common thing I know is the people are going to watch them are people like me who love film. And anytime I would create something for a Blu-ray or a DVD, the way I would always approach it is, if I was buying this, what would I want to see? And I'll give you an example. I did the DVDs for a 90s TV series that I love called Babylon 5, all right, which was a 5-year, first run syndication about a space station, Babylon 5, and it starred a lot of great actors and great people involved, actors like Bruce Boxleitner, Rick Biggs, both of whom I brought onto the Dawn of the Dead DVD. Excuse me, Jerry Doyle, and oh my gosh, and so many other names that I got to work with: Claudia Christian, Tracy Scoggins, and Stephen Furst, late Stephen Furst. And in working with them, I remember doing the DVDs, and I was still starting. I was still trying to figure it out. And I said, what would I want on there? And I said, you know what I always loved about the show was at the end of the episode or the week leading up to the next episode, there would be a spot. It would say, on the next Babylon 5, and they would have a 30-second commercial.
Yeah.
But you never saw those then again. So I made a point of, I found it when I started on the second season. I found in the Warner archives the tapes where they had all the spots. So I made a point of it, of having those spots in front of every episode. So you could have a teaser, which I think I was the first person to do that. And a lot of people did that after that. And it was a great thing to have. I'm like, the geeky fanboy in me would love that. When it got to be the last episode of Babylon 5, season 5, we could only find the roughs of those commercials. The commercials there, but we couldn't find the original voiceover.
Sure.
So I hired a sound-alike to come in, and we re-recorded from the temp dialogue and all that, what would have been the trailers.
That's
and
cool.
so I changed all of that around.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And all that. And then I did get to do, I made one little creative decision. I took one creative license. On the very last episode, because they didn't know that was going to be the last episode, it said on the season finale of Babylon 5, I said, we have to change one word. Got to make it series finale. By the way, those who don't know, the series finale of Babylon 5 in season 5 was actually originally created for season 4 when they thought they weren't getting a season 5. At the last minute, they found out they got a season 5.
Okay.
The creator, Joe Michael Straczynski, took that episode, banked it, created a new kind of standalone episode, the only episode that wasn't really within the serial style for season 4. And then when season 5 came, he put that at the end. He had done his series finale, and that was always going to be the series finale. By the way, if you look at, this is why you should listen to the audio commentaries. You hear those types of stories and all that. And I'll give you one more DVD thing where I talk about the stuff I loved. I had the pleasure, I'll say the honor, of doing the DVD for Gilligan's Island. Now, I, like many people my age, I won't say what that age is, older, would come home from school and would watch Gilligan's Island. And then like the Brady Bunch, it'd be back to back on whatever the local stations were. Where both those shows were created by the same gentleman, Sherwood Schwartz, the legendary Sherwood Schwartz. And so when I got the chance to do Gilligan's Island, I got to do an interview with Sherwood Schwartz. Now, at that point, several of the actors had passed away. Jim Backus, Alan Hale were no longer with us. So they focused on Sherwood Schwartz. We did get some of the surviving ones later. We got, at the time, Bob Denver, Dawn Wells, and Russell Johnson. Those were the only three who were surviving who were willing to participate. And I actually, in the final thing, I only had Russell Johnson was on 2 or 3 for various reasons. But when I sat down, I got to do the interview with Sherwood Schwartz. And sitting down, he was in his, I'm going to say, early 80s when I did the interview, still sharp as a tack. It was like talking to your grandfather. And we sat and we talked for hours on the show and the love and all that. And he actually loaned me the original Bible he did for Gilligan's Island. And I turned it into what was originally going to be an Easter egg, but it's actually one of my favorite special features. It's called Before the 3-Hour Tour, which I didn't come up with that name. The Warner exec who was on the project came up with that name, Kristen. And it was great. And it was a whole thing of comparing the original pilot, or excuse me, the original Bible to the pilot and to the eventual show that came out. Because there was what they called the Lost Pilot, which ended up on that first season, where a lot of the characters were different. It wasn't Ginger and Marianne. It was Ginger and Bunny. They were played by 2 different actresses. They had... the professor was actually a high school teacher played by a different actor. And it was also black and white. Who wants to see black and white? But no, the first season was in black and white. But I remember doing that interview, and it was so much fun. And what I took away from it, one of the biggest compliments I've ever received in doing the DVDs and all that, I got done. And Sherwood said to me, he's like, I think this is the last interview I'm going to give on Gilligan's Island. I'm like, oh my God, are there health issues? I said, what do you mean? He's like, you nailed this so well. I think if anybody wants to talk about Gilligan's Island, I'll just tell them to watch the DVD. Couldn't have been a better compliment.
That's amazing.
So that was amazing. And then the other thing I remember, I always, when I would get the copies of the DVDs, when the DVDs would get made, I would always send a set to my parents. Like I said, my biggest fans, always have been, always will be.
Yes, sir.
So I remember it made me think back to growing up, how my parents would say, why are you watching Gilligan's Island? It's rotting your brain. Go outside and play. It's never going to help you down the road. So when I got to hand him a copy of Gilligan's Island, I said, Mom, Dad, just put the roof over my head, put the food on my plate.
Yeah.
It wasn't kind of one of those to my parents. It was just saying, I was so passionate I was able to make this work. And again, my parents have always been my biggest supporters. And I will tell you this, anyone wants to get into film and all that, or any type of thing, your parents are always your biggest fans. They are your friends, your family. They're the ones who are going to support you. And I talked about how thrilled I was when I saw the poster for Shark Attack. The other moment was when I got to hand my parents the DVD for it, and when I got to tell them it was premiering on HBO. So when it came out on HBO, my parents had a party at their house to show that all their friends to say, look what my dad and mom, look what our son did.
Yeah.
And it was so thrilling. And actually, my dad used to embarrass me consistently when we would go to Blockbuster. We would go there, I'd be looking for a movie. He'd find where Shark Attack was. And he would stand there. When people go by, he's like, you should rent that movie. It's a really good movie. My son wrote it. He's right over there. Scott, what do you think? Come on, talk about your movie. I'm like, oh, gosh. But it was like, there was my dad who said, oh, don't go into film, go into computer science, all that. Yeah. Sitting there beaming with pride and making my parents happy and proud of me for that is something I will take with me the rest of my life.
Yes, sir.
So
that is,
again, tangents, but
no, that's truly so wonderful. And something that I really appreciate about you is you're such a fan of the medium. Like you have this profound appreciation for everything that goes into it, every little nuance, all of the history. And it's really refreshing to see that. And another person I see that in is actually Luca over here. Like he's such an incredible consumer of art, and the way he talks about it is so profound to me. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was truly beautiful.
Here's the thing. It's one of the reasons, now my primary role is as a film professor. And I got to say, I love the idea of getting paid to talk about stuff I would anyway. This is what I talk about. It's it's this, or now also with the running of the triathlons, I'll talk your ears off on that. But it's what I love, and so talking about it for me, I am thrilled. I beam. I get excited when I talk about it. The old concept of when you do something you love, it's the last day you'll ever work, which is true to some extent. I mean, look, there are aspects of my job whether it's doing legal stuff or things of that nature, I'm like, this is drudgery, but it allows me to get to do what I love, which is talk about film and all that. And people they'll say, what films do you love? And that's like, wow, asking someone who their favorite kid is or whatever. So I always say, here's some of the films I love. And people are like, well, what films do you absolutely hate? And I don't like saying that because I know how challenging it is to get a film made. Just to capture an image on a camera is profoundly difficult. And the fact that we get anything that makes a semblance of sense is, should be applauded. So I can look at a film and I can say, boy, this film for the most part, not very good, but I can almost always find something I like, and even what I consider to be the least desirable films. And I can also embrace the cheese and all that, but maybe there's one line or one scene or something along those lines. And of course, the ones that are classics, I take with me, and so many lines that come, and if you talk to me, you'll see I'm constantly throwing out obscure movie quotes and references and all that. And I always like to see, does it go right over their head or does this land? Oh, that landed, cool. So when someone goes, oh, I know that film, I'm like, oh, bravo. So
that's really cool.
That's amazing.
That's really cool.
We as part of researching this episode, we found ourselves on Rabid Badger. And so we were wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what you're doing there. This is your company, from my understanding.
It is my production shingle. Yeah.
Break it down.
I also need to know the name.
I will tell you how it came. All right, the name came to be. When you're in high school and in college and all that, of course, the idea of I want my own production company, my own film studio and all that. And so I went through a couple of little names, but when I got into college, I said, you know what? I went to the University of Wisconsin, and the mascot of the University of Wisconsin is the Badgers. Yes, and I was saying sometime, I was working on something, and the words Rabid Badger plopped out of my mouth, and I went, that would be a cool production name. yeah, that's what it's going to be.
I love that.
So I always said, if I get out there and have a chance, I would do Rabid Badger. Now, when I speak, unfortunately, I was born in Jersey, by the way. My Jersey accent comes through. So Rabid Badger sometimes can trip people up a little bit. It's not, it's very similar. But that's where the name came from. It's like, it's a shout out to my alma mater, one of my two alma maters, University of Wisconsin, go Badgers. Florida State, go Noles. They play each other. I do have to cheer for the Badgers because you cheer for your undergrad. And I went to all their games. But yeah, that's where it came from. It was something when I was in college and came up with that. And if you look at some of the production company names or the vanity cards and all that, a lot of them are kind of silly inside references, inside jokes, things people loved. As again, one of my buddies, Constantine Nasser, who did DVD stuff with me, he's a huge Lord of the Rings fan. So his production shingle is Rivendell film. So things
great.
like, there you go,
Yeah.
or places where they come from. So having fun with that. So, the idea is if you want to get into the industry, you're either going to work at a company full time or you're going to freelance. And I tell this in the classes I teach, you're probably going to bounce back and forth. Starting out your career, a career is a marathon. You're in it for the long haul. You're going to work a multitude of jobs. And at times in your life, it might make sense to work for a company. And other times it might make sense to be freelance. So you want to basically create a level of separation between you as a person and what you do. So there's Scott Devine, the person, and then there is Scott Devine, the producer and writer. And in the business world and all that, you have to protect yourself. So having a company, an LLC, which Rabid Badger is, it is my production shingle. It is a company that consists of me and my pug, if you want to put him in there. The address the company is registered at, I set it up here in Georgia. The company is still headquartered at my parents' house because when I first moved here, I stayed with my parents until I figured where I was going to get a place, and I set the company up there, and mom and dad are still there. I never bothered changing it. So every once in a while, my mom gets Scott, you got a statement for Rabid Badger, if they forget to get it to my current address. Yeah. So really what it is it's a way of the business side of me, and it just provides a level of protection in the event that something ever goes awry. And anyone who wants to get into the industry, you're going to learn the fun stuff about taxes and insurance and all those types of things, which, the intersection of creativity and commerce. Yeah. So that's it. So I go into Rabid Badger. I've got my little logo. I've got my website up, rabidbadger.com. Go check it out. You can see some of the stuff I've worked on. But yeah, that's really what it is. So it's, it was my focus for so long. Now I'm much more involved in the education side and, looking for students there. I still do the occasional studio project. So people say, hey, do you want to work on this for a couple of days or during the summers or whatever? If I have the opportunity, great. I love, dipping my feet back into that pool. Yes. But, that said, those 14, 16-hour days on set and all that and being away for a lot of time, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. But I still enjoy it. But I do like, going to bed at a reasonable hour, waking up at a reasonable hour, being able to spend time with my dog, with a girlfriend, and all that stuff. So yeah, Rabid Badger is...
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is a more personal question, and you've left little breadcrumbs throughout this conversation.
We're going to Hansel and Gretel it.
Yes, sir. Running.
We've
talked a little bit about in class as well, triathlons, swimming, just general fitness. What does running mean to you?
Running is something, it is, people say it's my other passion. I actually had a friend of mine, I was at Comic-Con, and I was talking about my races, and he's like, you sure running isn't your number one passion more than film? I said, you know what? They're both fighting for my attention. I'll say this is me getting up on my soapbox. Health is important to me. And especially as you start getting older, you realize, man, your metabolism up there. That pizza that you could eat when you're 18 years old sticks around a little longer. And I've seen people have health issues and all that. And, where running came from for me was, it actually was something that really helped me through. And it started really around 2008 and all that stuff. Now, I mean, growing up, I did sports and all that. I was never the jock. My brother was the jock of the family. I was much more the bookworm and the film guy. But I remember I was in LA, and look, when I talk about careers, I said you're going to be freelance and full-time. Yeah. You're also going to have your ups and downs. As a lot of my friends now, or the last couple of years have, you might get fired or laid off. So around that time, 2008, I think it was, I've been working so hard. I wasn't taking care of myself physically. I was a bit overweight, wasn't happy with what I saw in the mirror. And I did a 10K. I'd done a few of the Peachtree, but it was like once a year. I really didn't consider myself, I wasn't a runner or anything. I just did it once in a while. And I decided to do this race called the Human Race that Nike did. And it was in August of 2008, I want to say. And right around that time, like I said, I was trying to hope to get in better shape. There was a family health scare. Both my father and my mother had significant heart issues within a couple weeks of each other. They both pulled through. They're both here to this day, and I'm so thrilled for that. But there was that, and then he said to my brother and I, go get your heart checked out and all that, and go get yourself looked at. And I looked, and they said, okay, you're okay, but you're overweight. And the job I was at, things weren't going the greatest. I was in a bit of a toxic relationship at that point, and everything kind of collapsed at once. The relationship ended. I got laid off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need something. Mm-hmm. And I had done this race. And I remember saying to myself, if I do this race and I like it, maybe I'll do something crazy like run a marathon. Never done anything more than 10K. Why would I? And I did that race and it was okay. And then all this stuff hit like right then and there. And I went, I need something. I'm like, I'm going to run a marathon. And there was I found in the windows of one of the restaurants I used to go to a thing for a training program, training called T2, or team in training and all that stuff. It was actually, no, strike that, Team to End AIDS. And it was a charity group that trained you to run a marathon. So what you did was you raised money for them, and they trained you to run a marathon. And I used this as a way when things weren't the greatest. And I had it where I wasn't working at the time. I was looking for work like a lot of people. And I'm like, you know what? I may not do anything today, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to run. And I trained with them, and we raised money for a wonderful charity, AIDS Project Los Angeles. And every Saturday we did a group run. And I met up with this group of like-minded crazy people who get up at the crack of dawn and go run. And a lot of us weren't runners. And we had this great group of coaches, and I met so many people, many of whom I'm still very good friends with. And they trained us to run a marathon. And my running coach, a gentleman named Scott Bolivar, who unfortunately passed away around 2012, 2013, who taught me to run, really became this motivation for me. And I transformed myself. And I found in the running, it was great for the body, but it was even better for the mind. Yes, sir. It was my zen. It was my happy place. And on the runs by myself, I could go out there, and sometimes I would figure things out. Or if I went out and I had something that was bothering me that day, I took it out on the road, and I ran hard, and I went home, and it's like it etch-a-sketched my brain. And so the whole goal was originally to do one marathon and be done. It was a bucket list thing. Yeah. And I got done, and I crossed the finish line. And same thing like when I saw the movie poster, I started crying because I had spent, I don't know how many months, and I was in good shape, and I had done something I thought impossible. I had challenged myself and kicked myself outside the comfort zone. And as a result, I just never stopped. And to date, I have completed 11 full marathons, 60 some odd half marathons, about 200 other races. And last year, I got into triathlons. And I tell my students this, and it's always great when I have the early morning classes and they're coming in, they're tired. I'm like,
we were at 8
a.m.
Yep.
I said, guys, I was in the pool at 5 a.m. It's great for me. I work on lesson plans when I'm in the pool, but it's something that centers me. And I also say this, it is the one thing in the world I do just for me. Yes. If I want to say if it's my selfish thing, it's my thing. This is the thing, it's for me, and I've got a lot of people who support me in it and all that. Some people are like, I don't understand why you do it, but it's important to you, so have at it. So as a result, it's just become, it's kind of ingrained itself in my DNA So, it's another thing I'm passionate about.
Yes, sir.
So that's my little side thing. And I will
fantastic.
say this. I still like burgers and beer. So running triathlons and all that stuff, you cannot run a bad diet, but it helps a bit. So, and I'll tell you this, I ran 10 miles earlier today before I came out for this because I've got 3 races coming up in the next month.
That's amazing.
incredible.
I had like 7 pancakes. Perfect.
There you go.
Well,
I had those after the race.
We're working on it. We have the gym on the calendar.
We
so
do.
We're
It's
trying
up.
our best out here.
We are.
Okay, so the way we wrap up every episode here is we have something called a briefcase segment,
Okay.
where we don't know what the topic is, you don't know what the topic is, but Luca does. So he's going to give us something here, and we're just going to see what happens.
Oh, Luca's
So-
going to punish us.
Okay, Luca's coming in a frame.
Do we do a drum roll here?
This is going to completely switch up the vibe right now.
Okay.
All right.
So I want to know, all 3 of you, when you go into a movie theater,
Okay.
what snack/snacks and drink do you all get? What's the go-to?
So it's about to get heated. is
So,
what
Okay.
we're saying.
so this is the most profound question of the day.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Who's starting?
I guess, of course.
Okay, go.
All right.
Scott, go right ahead.
Well, in the way back days when it came going to movie theater, I was a fan of, when I was, a teenager, you don't have a lot of money. So I would go into the theaters and I would theater hop. Shh. That's where you go see one movie and you get done, you go to another. I spent many an afternoon theater hopping from one movie to another. So of course, you've got to have the snacks and all that stuff to get you go. So I would get a big thing of popcorn and a big, Diet Coke or whatever to get me through. And I was like, when they would have the free refills, awesome. Cut to nowadays, the go-to thing. I still like the popcorn. Gotta say, I love the popcorn. Actually, there was a theater in theater chain in L.A. ArcLight Cinemas. They're not really around anymore, but like the Cinerama Dome, where they would have caramel corn that they would make there.
Yes.
I love that stuff. Oh my gosh. But my go-to thing is I want to be able to shovel stuff into my mouth. So if I'm not going to go for popcorn, I am an A-list member at AMC, so you get the bigger sizes. Oh, and now they have the refills of the soda, so that's awesome. Or the popcorn, I go on Tuesdays and I get the $5. I will sometimes get the M&Ms, and I'm going to say this here. Don't hate me out there if I do it. I have been known to be a bit of a smuggler. I like M&Ms, and I like the mini M&Ms. So very often what I'll do is I'll get a soda when I go in there, but I might bring with me a little tube of those mini M&Ms so I can, because I don't want them to be gone before the trailers are.
Yeah.
So it's if I need the candy, it's the mini M&Ms or M&Ms and popcorn. I do like the Whoppers. I like when they used to come in the milk carton and do all that. I'll give you one more snack story for that. When my mom will go to the movie theaters, she loves the popcorn and all that. So every year, for the longest time, one of the gifts I would get my mom at Christmas time, actually I get her 2 things. I would get her Leonard Maltin's book on video reviews back when he did those. Every year it was like I would give her that, and I would get her the refillable bucket from AMC where she could go and you could get the popcorn, and she would get the bucket, and then she would bring a little like solo cups with her, so we'd get the big bucket, and then she would distribute it to everybody and all that. So there we go. So it's a very roundabout answer. So
That's fantastic.
so yeah, it's popcorn, soda, and if I'm smuggling, little M&Ms, mini M&Ms.
Scott, you're about to see a war transpire on this side. here.
Awesome.
Okay.
Bring it on. What do we got
So
here?
you're on point with the popcorn. You got to have the
Agreed.
biggest refillable popcorn in the world that you
Yes.
could possibly get. For drink, though, I feel like a child when I say this, but an icy is just an amazing thing to me. And,
Wait,
and
what
especially
flavor icy?
Okay. This is where it's going to get controversial.
Ooh, heck yeah.
So I actually don't like the Coca-Cola icy.
Okay.
And I love Coca-Cola as a beverage, but the cherry and the blue raspberry, you just can't go wrong. So usually I switch them off. So like every time I go to a movie, it's like, okay, last time I had blue, this time I'm getting red. But like the ices are just such an amazing invention. Like whenever I lose my faith in humanity, an icy revives it.
We've been drinking those a lot.
Yeah. We should get some.
We should.
Good idea.
Popcorn, for sure.
Okay.
We can agree on popcorn.
Okay.
Last time we were at the movies, do you remember what we did with our popcorn? We tried something new.
Oh yeah. Oh no.
Scott, I wanna illustrate what we did. We did a big old bucket. There were 4 of us. We went over to the butter machine where you can add additional butter.
Butter flavoring, right?
Butter flavoring, of course. Butter flavoring. And we got a straw. And what we did was we put the straw in the middle
Oh no.
of the popcorn, push the button, fake butter, went through the straw, and then we would lift the straw.
So it hits all the
equally.
different layers of the bucket.
Genius. It was the best popcorn I think we've ever had. Luke is laughing right now.
We probably ate the entire bucket.
Oh, we very much did. And our arteries.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
I got a popcorn story.
Yep.
And it ties back to the Star Wars films. And my mom kind of puts a whole encapsulation on this. So, seeing Star Wars, no one knew Star Wars was going to be the hit it was. And I saw that in 77, and oh my gosh, and saw it so many times in the theaters, loved it. When Empire came out in 80, I didn't get to see it right away. Right. Because, hey, I was 11 at the time. Hey, can't drive and all that. You're relying on people. And where I lived at the time, there wasn't a movie theater right nearby like when I saw Star Wars. I was now living in northern Jersey, and it was a big deal to get to the theater. So when I got to see it, I had already missed some of the secrets. Yeah. And I said, darn it. When the next one comes out, because obviously I knew there had to be a next one, I got to find out what's going on with Luke there, and are they going to get Han Solo out of the carbonite? I want to be there opening day. So cut to 1983, May 1983, Return of the Jedi is coming out. And I told my mom, I want to go see it. She's like, well, it's opening on, and you have a school day. I looked at her, and I was a really good student. I said, I want to go see it opening day. She went, okay. You're going to play hooky that day. My mom took a half day off of work, worked in the morning, and came home to take me to go see Return of the Jedi on opening day.
Amazing.
So she came home. This is how much my mom rocks.
Yes.
And she took me, and so we went there, and I saw it at the Paramus Theater, and we went up, and this was back before you could get tickets ahead of time. So we saw the lines, and I went, oh man, there's no way it's going to be completely sold out. Yeah. We're screwed. And I said, let me go check. And I went up to the box office, and they said, well, all the 70 millimeter ones are sold out, but there's a 35 millimeter version that's going to start in about 45 minutes that there's still seats. Great. So we got the tickets. And then when we went inside, they had the program, which was like talking about the movie and all that. It had a white cover, Return of the Jedi. So of course, Mom, I got to have it. Of course, Mom's like, all right, sure. I said, I got to have popcorn and soda. And she said, sure. And I got that. And white cover the magazine. And I had my popcorn with the grease, and we watched the movie and we loved it. I mean, Mom's like, okay, it's a fun movie, but she made me happy. That's why Moms rock. And I got done, and I looked at home, and I saw that the cover of the Return of the Jedi thing was like permanently stained from the grease from the popcorn. I still have that program to this day. 40 some odd years later. And I actually was doing something in my apartment. I pulled it out, and when I see something like that, it takes me right back. And I look at that, and I'm like, and I saw the grease, and I'm like, people are like, oh my gosh, it's ruined. I'm like, no, it's not.
It's perfect.
It's perfect.
That's beautiful. And I think a perfect place to end. So, Scott, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
My pleasure.
It truly
Thanks for
was
having
an
me.
honor. I think we've probably learned, we got an entire college education in the last 2 hours. So this has been truly amazing.
Fantastic.
My pleasure.
Are there anything at all you want to say? Still cameras are rolling. Anything you want to promote?
I mean, really, I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, I'll talk anybody's ears off about film. Look, if I want to say something like this for people, do you, there's this whole thing of chasing film, and for me, it was chasing my dream. And people always say, should I chase my dream? And, we go around this crazy world once. And I got into film, and like I said, I had the fallback with teaching, which actually was always going to be my plan. I'll say this. I always knew at some point I was going to go into teaching, because either A, I was going to get tired of Hollywood, or Hollywood would get tired of me. Because, look, the isms we hear about the industries and all that, you hear about, racism, you hear about sexism and all that. The ism we don't hear enough about, or is kind of brushed under, is ageism. And when you get to a certain age, you're either making the higher bucks and they don't want to pay it, or, hey, we want to try something new. And I know a lot of people who are my age are getting kind of, pushed out, or Hollywood's saying we don't need you anymore. So the teaching was always the way I was going to go. But what I will say is having that degree and knowing it was something I could do and be happy with gave me, for lack of a better term, the safety net, the opportunity to go full tilt boogie at this and see if I can make it. And I will say, if you try something and it doesn't work out and you gave it your all, you can walk away knowing you tried it, because the joy is in the effort. The joy is in the journey, not the destination. All right. So I am thrilled with the films I got made. I've had my ups, I've had my downs. All right. But the joy is in the journey and the struggle and all that. And I say, if you have that dream, you owe it to yourself to try it. But if you're going to do it, you have to give it with everything you have. And you may make it or you may not. Because, being successful in this industry and so many others, it is the combination of hard work and a little bit of luck. But luck is when opportunity and preparedness intersect. So, be willing to take a risk, because the rewards are almost always worth it. And if not, you are still the person who is at the end of that journey is different than the one at the beginning, and you are a better person, a wiser person for doing it.
Well, then that is officially a wrap on the Scott Devine interview.
There you go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.